underneath it. Anyone in a tweet.
All right.
All right.
Sounds good. All right. Hello and welcome to episode 36 of The Crackdown. This is our first return guest we have ever had on the show. It is Yamato once again. I thought last week's episode was a banger, so why not run it back? The same Worlds crew, since we've all been obviously watching a lot of the World Championships recently.
Plus, as Sandbox found out, you never know when Yamato's going to be around, when he's just going to go off and do some other adventures, you know, like, I can tell when he coached the team, you get the fucking free hat. Like, what's that all about? You're only minutes, mate. What are you doing? You're going in like, we will establish a new order that will reign a winning culture for thousands of years. Like, I regret to inform you, my week is done at Sandbox, and I enjoyed it very much, but I'll never forget you. I'll never forget you and the ramen. Goodbye, guys. Like, what's going on, bro?
Nah, man. It's a wild year. It's a completely wild year. You know, I chose to not resign a contract. I honestly, Sandbox was my best esports experience in my life for sure. Like in terms of organization, in terms of like I've been around the block, right? And like I had everything that I needed there, and we know like on both sides the story is far from over, and maybe further down the line it's going to happen again. Like I'm going to continue to study Korean, but it's just the timing isn't right now, and it's due to multiple reasons. But I don't want this to turn into a diary episode, so let's just get into the business.
Exactly. Let's just save as much time to talk shit on TSM and NA as we can. Let's any time when any of that niceties at the beginning.
All right, sounds good. I mean, before we start shit talking NA, I saw one thing that Yamato tweeted about the format, and I'm pretty sure we can all agree this format is complete dog shit. I mean, the reason why you
can pick, isn't it? Like, let's be real.
Yeah, I mean, the reason why you watch Worlds is to see all the teams from all the different regions collide, play against each other. You want to see the comparison. How nice would it have been if we just got three times of a Chinese team versus a Korean team?
Of course.
That's
the dream.
Yeah, that would be the dream. That's what we do this stuff for. So I mean, the first thing that I wanted to talk about was just that format, because it feels so weird that like half the bracket is LPL, the other half is LCK. You got two European teams that could potentially both be eliminated in the first round, and then you don't even get to see at the end like who the real strongest region is, because it's just going to be like, all right, one LPL team, like maybe the best LPL team is worse than the best LCK team, but I want to see like all the teams fight. So I know you might have had some words on it. I would love to know his opinion.
Yeah, like I agree. Like I think some of these matchups are like, sure, maybe for an LPL fan it's good to see a rematch or whatever, but these are matches we've seen so many times in the past. It's also so disappointing to walk away from World Championship thinking like, oh, what would have happened in this matchup. I think just the idea of double elimination, like coming into these quarters best of fives is so fucking exciting. Like the matchups we have are also exciting on their own, but there's going to be so many that we miss out on, and I think that's just a tragedy in itself. Like I think just make a double elimination, maybe put first seeds on one side, and then you have, from the get-go, you have a top piece versus down one best of five, and then maybe they face each other again at the end of the tournament. This is something that both the LEC and NA did. I think the system over in the LCK sucks when it comes to playoffs, because for the same reason you get robbed off of these beautiful best of fives, and I think it's just a massive disservice to me and to us, I assume, to anyone that wants to see these great teams face off against each other.
I mean, listen, I agree with the whole bracket thing. Like, it does suck that all the Chinese teams are on one side, all the Koreans are on the other, because obviously likelihood is, I mean, literally they're going to eliminate each other. So we're not going to actually get to see those like real matchups we haven't seen at all. But even in terms of like other storylines in the bracket, like, I don't know if people know this, but from that like mid-season cup thing they did instead of MSI for Asia, where it was like LCK versus LPL, like actually Top Esports is undefeated against Korean teams. So as a result, like, wouldn't it be perfect if they were on the Korean side of the bracket? But instead, they can only at best play one Korean team, and that's if they don't get upset by like Jingdong or something, which can definitely happen. So I know that part doesn't have to do with the format, that's just happenstances which side of the bracket you went on, but even that's kind of like made the storyline not as interesting. You can do the same on the other side. G2's had great success against Koreans, never done anything against LPL, but of course they don't get any LPL teams less to make the final. So like, even though for every tournament, generally, if it's a really big esports tournament, I think double elim just makes the most sense. It just gets rid of a lot of these problems, etc. Like this one especially is crying out for that, because this bracket at the moment just doesn't look that great. Like, think about how long we've had to wait to get to this point. This should be the most exciting time of all, where it's like, right, this is like the night before Christmas, like, fuck, can't wait for this. But then it's like dude, even on some of the matchups, like, who the fuck wants to see Damwon game against DRX? Like, I don't want to see that match.
I mean, we watched LCK.
Yeah, it's only been literally either a stomp for Damwon or like the worst game ever that DRX won earlier in the split. Like, these aren't good matches. Like, these aren't even games you want to see.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I mean, there's a couple different ways you could go about it. I mean, originally in groups you have the thing where you know, you can't have teams from the same region in each group. I don't know if there was.
I don't know why that's such a big deal, personally. You know?
Yeah, I don't know why that's such a big deal.
To me, the solution's obvious, dude. Like, that's why I made this point on Someone in Insight, but people keep missing it. You don't look at what happens and decide after the fact, like, oh, I should have changed it so that Team A could play Team B. Because that's like, at that point in time, like, that's not the way any system's designed. What you need to do is this. Before you do the system, you have to think of it abstractly before you know the teams. Like, what is the principle I'm going for here? Like, for example, what is my group stage supposed to do? And if in this case, Riot really believe in that principle of, like, you can't have two teams from the same region. Well, if you ask them, well, why though? Presumably they'd say something like, well, you know, you have a limited amount of games at Worlds, so you don't want to, like, waste, for example, Chinese teams just playing Chinese teams, and you never get to see the matchup against someone from Europe or Brazil or wherever it might be. Well, here's the thing. If Riot really believes that, if that's the reason, it's not just that it has to be this one format, I can solve it for them. Here's one of the things you do. You make less groups. So then you can still have teams from the same region, but they will also get plenty of competition. Like, the whole reason why TI, if people don't know, in the old school, used to often have two massive groups, so that you play, like, even if you go out in last place, you play like 7 opponents or something. In that setting, it doesn't really matter that you play one extra Chinese team or something if you're from China, does it? Like, you'll still play the teams from Europe and teams from any. If anything, if you actually schedule it right, like, it'll be more interesting for the teams that go out. Like, they'll get a better spread of opponents. So my point is, if you know going in what you're looking for, we can make tweaks to the format, and we can still take into account what Riot wants, by the way. We don't have to throw that out the window. Like, one thing I try to do whenever I analyze things like that is I don't just go from my own idealistic fantasy of what esports should be. Like, I try to also look at, like, what are the, like, realistic concerns of the tournament organizer, people like, right, not least because, by the way, if you're trying to convince them, you need to be able to speak their language. You have to show you understand what they're going for. And I think in that area, Riot's just being a little bit sort of short-sighted. Like, they're thinking, as far as I can tell, that it can only be this same format we've had for, like, I think it was since Season 4 Worlds now, or it has to be something, presumably something radically different. You can tweak it a little bit and we can fix a lot of these problems. I promise.
Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the things that they did better this year was the play-in stage. Like, that format, we talked about it's just way more conducive to finding a competitive, you know, a result, or, like, get competitive games if that's the goal. I mean, having the third seeds play the second seeds, or the way that I could see this working out pretty well if you don't want to do a million games is you do the double elimination format and you slot the third seeds in each group into the losers bracket automatically. So the third seeds only get single elimination, and the winners, the top two, get double elimination. So you can still get all the great storylines. Like, let's say Gen.G and Suning throughout the whole tournament end up being the best two teams. Like, how epic would it be if Suning gets knocked out by Gen.G but then runs the entire lower bracket? I mean, they have to play against third seed, so it should be like they get a layup in there, but I mean, you still get to see more games, you get to see more hype, and I feel like it's just a better result for everyone involved. And also, like, I don't really think that you know, Worlds is overbearing, or there's, like, too many games, right? It feels like you have all these group stage games, right? You have 8 days pure group stage. Like, it takes a long time to finish, and then you get to the bracket stage and it's like, all right, there's 4 matches, then 2 matches, then 1 match, and you're done. 7 best of 5s, that's it. You know, like, I feel like there just should be more gameplay for the best teams instead of, like, how many weeks of play, like, what we got how many days of play-ins plus group stage combined. Like, that's the majority of the tournament. That's the majority of the games being played. So.
Do you know a piece of trivia? I don't know how many people know this, right? But it's actually very pertinent for right now, Dom. So the ultimate thing, I even thought of this as soon as it happened. When TSM went 0-6 in their group, which has
we're going straight into it.
Listen,
okay.
Why fuck around? You know,
no, I'm done.
They're roasted on the spit and it's starting to get ready. Just tuck in, you know.
Yeah, sounds
you
good.
don't have to eat the fucking whatever French food they would have as a warm-up. Snails or some, I don't fucking know. Any old shite. Right, what people won't know is this piece of trivia. Let's cast our minds back in time, right? if you remember Season 5 Worlds, and by the way, we know Dom remembers this because that was the one time he was going to go to Worlds, and then High was like, Jungle, what's that role? Like, I've just got like a piece of string and a fucking like a seashell, and like, yeah, does that work? Oh, I won. Shit, see, Dom. Like, and then you were like, bro, really, bro? And then Piglet was just sat there like.
That was the season where I realized Jungle was an irrelevant role.
Faker's half decent, actually. I won't give him credit, but he's decent, I guess. Yeah. You know, he's all right. He's all right, whatever, you know.
That was the season I started hating Jungle. That was literally the season where I started complaining, because I was like in the final game that I played. The final game, I'm 5-0, and it looked fucking hopeless. I look around, like 5-0 in the game. I'm like, all right, we got a chance to win. Oh no, we're just going fucking home. Okay, nice. Jungle's fucking worthless, right there. That was the time. It just sunk in all right there. I'm like, I'm just gonna complain about Jungle for the next 5 years on Twitter.
And you did. But here's the thing, though. Here's what people won't know. So what I'm setting up is that Cloud9, where they came into Worlds, was super ropey. And if no one remembers, the group that they got was the Fnatic that had just fucking gone like undefeated in the regular split of Europe. They had IG from China, who had Lucky and Kakao, and everyone was scared of that team, actually. They looked like they were dangerous. And the third team was AHQ, when AHQ was still the best LMS team, when like they actually were legit, and they had like a strong top laner, that Ziv guy and stuff, and Westar was still on. Like, they were actually a good team at the time. So what people don't remember is, of the 4 teams, Cloud9 actually looked like they were going to be by far the worst. And so what happened was Yamato went for a bold prediction back then. And he said, are you ready? He said that Cloud9 would go 0-6. And everyone flamed him. And the reason why is the best, right? Because the reason they flamed him is because they said, accurately, no team in Worlds had ever, like, except a wild card or whatever. And I think maybe a wild card, I can't remember, but I think no team had ever gone 0-6, basically. So the logic everyone was using was like, oh, come on, bro, like, you're just a hater. Like, they're going to get at least 2 games. Or so, you know, like, that was the logic, right? Which makes it, obviously, even more, beautiful that TSM 5 years later actually did go 0-6. Actually did, by the way, as a #1 seed as well. Like, fucking hell, it's amazing. This year is amazing, isn't it? Like, I actually feel like this year, I used to think before, if I did things well, what I wanted in life would come to me. You know, I thought that was like a vague principle, you know, Marto. Now I actually feel like I do just live in a solipsistic universe, and I clearly am the protagonist of this whole thing. Because look at this shit that's just coming to me out of the sky, bro. Like, that whole thing where I was saying publicly, like, well, you know, even though it's in an abstract sense a conflict of interest, what's going on with Team Leader and Doublelift, of course, we could never catch them because they'd basically have to just sort of like confess.
Say it on stream.
I know, like, I just wait long enough for the universe, and then they were just like, yeah, here's a video of them just actually showing what they did. Like, mate, everything's happening this year. It's amazing. I told everyone, even when TSM won LCS, what did I say? I said good, because now when they lose at Worlds, it's even funnier, and it's way funnier. Dude, if they'd just lost that game to like Team Liquid's the obvious one. If they'd lost that game to Team Liquid, you wouldn't even flame them that much, because at the time, no one thought TSM was the best, did they? You'd just go like, whatever, they had a chance, but Team Liquid's better. Like, it actually wouldn't be as funny. It's actually the Schadenfreude is its peak now. It's absolute peak. This is delicious.
Yeah, what do you think about the 0-6 Yamato?
Honestly, very surprising. Like, some of the games that they played, they probably could have won.
For sure.
It was,
could have beat, wasn't it like Gen.G or something?
Gen.G, yeah.
They were like right up to the winning point, yeah.
But it's like sometimes you watch teams play, and it's like a gut feeling where you just see that there is like almost no soul behind anything that is done. And this is, of course, completely, you know, I'm just speculating, but
no, you can
the decisions that were like the decisions that were done. Yeah, there's no like idea. Like, for example, you watch PSG. Like, PSG, they came in and they just poured their heart out. They understood their weaknesses, they understood their strengths, and they took a game of JDG. They beat Rogue, and on paper they looked worse. They just came in swinging, and they understood their weaknesses. It felt like almost after the first game, where it was like almost a bit close against Fnatic. After that, it just seemed to go downhill because it seemed they tried to bring out their strategies with the Zillion and the whole, you know, LeBlanc blind pick and so forth. And it just had no fire behind it. And I think after that realization, which is kind of shocking because I think everyone made that same comment, you know, everyone had the same ideas, like, oh, some of the things that Bjergsen is doing in the LCS is not going to work on the world stage. So you'd assume...
No one said that, dude. No, that's false.
I believe Dom, people who just rationally hate TSM or something.
Yeah, no one ever said anything about Zillion not working versus pro teams. I disagree, but continue.
So you'd assume.
Dom knows this as well. We've now also done the full TSM elastic band. So they went from TSM fans themselves, like, cut everyone except Bjergsen, fuck Broken Blade, he's garbage, and Spica is a disgrace to the organization. They win LCS. I always believed in them all. I think Spica's the new future of the fucking jungle. Doublelift's turned it around. Broken Blade, we love you, baby. Import slot for like a month later. Fuck them all. Except maybe not Bjergsen, but I'm not quite sure on that one. But fuck everyone else. Like, they're right back already. Like, dude, well, it took you all like a month total to go in the full circle.
Finish up your point
No,
about
it's wild. It's really wild. No, just to finish, like, it's obvious that something went very wrong in terms of how they approach the game. Because, like, if you're going to a boot camp, I think these are the first issues that you want to address. And maybe from there, they just couldn't tangle out of it. Because I think you can pinpoint a few things, but I felt like, like the first game, the difference between Biofrost and Hylissang was just millions of miles ahead. And I think Spica did well. Like, considering he hasn't played that long. I was worried about how, like, his stage performance. I think he was, the light over in TSM. But then in terms of the preparation, it didn't seem like the boot camp bore any fruit for them. And sometimes that happens. I just feel like there's something deeper, and I don't think any TSM players have spoken up about this topic yet. I think probably that's a wise choice.
So I'm going to say that when I watched the group stage, I feel like the game that really just killed this team was the second game that they played, the one against Gen.G. Second game overall of the group stage. Not the second time they played against Gen.G, just their second overall match, because that was a game, and I know the feeling. So what I'm going to relate it to is in Season 5, there was a series I played, versus Cloud9. We were up 2-0, and then we got like our dream comp in the third game, which was a Juggernaut comp at that time. And it was supposed to be like auto win. Everyone would ban it out against us. They banned it out the first two games, and they had to like ban out the stuff we played in the first two games. We won, gave us the Juggernaut comp, and we lost. And after we lost that game, it was just like, holy shit, this is like our bread and butter. This is like our best strategy. How can we lose with this? And we just lost the next three because it was so like, it destroyed us so much to lose with what we were best at. And I feel like that happened to TSM this Worlds on their second game, because the way that they won NA was with the Rakan, Zilean, Nidalee, Renekton comp. That was like their bread and butter. That's their best comp possible. Spica on Nidalee, Bjergsen on Zilean. They won so many games with all these picks. They got everything they wanted, and they just ended up getting exploited in ways that they never got exploited in NA, right? Like, normally they were playing Zilean, and Zilean was just even farming, and it never mattered that they don't have prio mid, prio top with the Nidalee, which every other team generally is picking prio mid, prio top for the Nidalee, so that the Nidalee can perm invade top side, they can dive top on cooldown, they can play for Rift Tower, they can snowball the game in that way. And in that game, Bjergsen played against BDD. He plays Zilean against BDD's set. Gets absolutely destroyed in lane, down like 40, 50 CS versus set. Just 1v1, not even jungle pressure or anything. And Spica just gets perma invaded, right? And then they counterpick the Renekton too. The Renekton gets counterpicked with Volibear. Bjergsen has no pressure the entire time because he's playing Zilean. Down 50 CS. And Spica just gets invaded over and over as Nidalee. And then somehow he's just down 1,000,000 CS to the Lilia, which is just so foreign for them. And I feel like that game, when they got all their picks and it didn't work out, that's when they started feeling like, oh shit, we're fucked. Like, this is the game that we're supposed to have a free win on, and we just, we had no way of being able to win just based on the weaknesses of our strategy, not having the prio, not being able to like fight early around our Nidalee. So I don't know if you've ever had an experience like that before, Yamato, where you have like a go-to strategy and you end up losing on it. It destroys the team's confidence. But for me, I think that's the game that actually like killed them. I feel like that's the game that made them go 0-6.
I've had a similar situation back when I was a player. We played the LCS qualifier with Dragonborns, and we were up 2-0. And I had like my guys, like they were like pointing like one finger at the camera, like one more game, like they were like super cocky. Like, even though like I completely shouldered them, I was like 200 CS up against Kubon, like I annihilated him, I solo killed him over and over. And then we lost the third game, and it wasn't because we had like some composition that was like ours or whatever, but that when we lost the game, it was like someone smashed a mirror on the floor, like their reality just shattered. And the confidence just disappeared, and all of a sudden we need to change the whole draft. We need to ban this champion, we can't win against this champion, and we just lost 3 straight games in a very disgusting fashion. So it wasn't necessarily a similar idea, but when you are very confident and at your peak with something and you really believe in something and that is shattered, that can be very, very tough to recover from. And I could see it like in real time with my guys, like their face just, just collapsed.
Yeah, and you saw them. You saw them do this, right? They completely changed their draft. They're like, fuck, like Zilean was our main pick. We picked it on 5th into set. We thought that it could lane into everything, and then they're like, fuck it, LeBlanc blind. Like, it's like, wait, what? Like, chill the fuck out. Like, go back to like the Syndra. Like, there's like a middle ground here, but like they just overreacted so hard to that game, and it just feels like they just had no way to really win afterwards. I mean, when it comes down to individual players, I think Spica actually played pretty well, but there's been some weird narratives around Bjergsen, because I feel like Bjergsen had a very underwhelming Worlds. Like, I felt like he did.
I want to get into that in a minute, yeah.
Yeah, and I felt like he did play poorly, and I know there was a thread on Reddit where, LS was saying, like, don't flame him based on his stats, right? And I don't care about the stats, right? I didn't even know the stats.
I was thinking of just key mistakes he made in the game. That's what I was thinking of, yeah.
Yeah, so for me, I just feel like Bjergsen had a really bad Worlds in terms of just individual performance. Obviously, he's not playing, like, winning lane matchups, but even when he was playing, like, champions that he should be able to take over on, like, it just felt like there was so much of a disjointed just atmosphere about him and the rest of the team that it just felt really weird watching mid lane.
Mate, let's just start with that. How can the same broadcast people and fans who told me Bjergsen just 1v9 the LCS playoffs then go, but he was playing supportive champions? Well, why would he be doing that if he was 1v9ing? Why the fuck would you play Zilean against Korean mid laners who also play Zilean if you're trying to 1v9? That makes zero sense. Literally, it makes Zilean zero sense. None at all. So let's just throw that out the window, because that only makes sense as an excuse if Bjergsen is a competent teammate and understands that Broken Blade or Doublelift, one of these guys is going to carry the game. So either we acknowledge that, in which case he was wrong, so he still fucked up the game. But if we acknowledge, right, what I actually think, which is that he really thought these were his best picks. I made this point to people in the LCS playoffs. The only games in all those series he had to win through the lower bracket of the LCS playoffs that Bjergsen won that weren't on TF and Zilean were just Syndra picks, which is literally his signature champion and was a meta champion. He wasn't displaying a champion ocean, guys. I know you guys wanted it to be that he's such a genius, he figured out the only champions people could. No, it's the other way around. Those are the only champions he can play. He has not shown he can play any other champions. And the fact that you're picking Zilean into a fucking Korean Zilean player tells me you are desperate as fuck. This is after a boot camp, remember. This isn't like day one of arriving in Korea. This is after all your preparation, after you've prepared. This is like a million drafts are supposed to be on a whiteboard somewhere. And this is supposed to be one that they were navigating towards. They wanted them. This is why the Bjergsen angle doesn't work. And you know what? I'll just point this out as a disclaimer, even though idiots will never care. I do defend Bjergsen at many of the other tournaments. Like, I've never been one who went too far, like, oh, he's just doing great and it's the rest of TSM like Doublelift that suck. I think he's been underwhelming at a lot of Worlds, but the difference in the past was this, Dom. If he was underwhelming at a past Worlds, it's like he played all right, everyone else played bad, and he just never carried the games, right? The problem I have at this Worlds was he played, I actually thought, like, as bad as a bunch of them, and he just actually gets away with it because he's got this established narrative that he always carries. It's never Bjergsen's fault. Like, you know what? The other Gen.G game is the one I wanted to bring up, dude. Because here's a perfect example where I'm going to use what LS said, but against him. So here's the irony. The stat line of Bjergsen's second game against Gen.G sounds like he had a great game. He was like 7-2-5 on Lucian or something, right? Sounds awesome. What's that for? And he's playing Lucian. He's got a great score line, and they narrowly lost the game. Sounds like he must have carried. Go back and watch that moment, which just shows you what scum TSM fans are. Because everything about that thrown Baron, where they have the Baron to like that much and they just back off and let it get taken, everything, right, was about Spica. Everyone was like, look, oh, idiot, he did the fucking smite.
Man, Doublelift triggered me so hard there.
No, guys, it was nothing to do with Spica. Nobody on his team was hitting the Baron. Not a single player. And are you ready for the ultimate one of all? Bjergsen had fucking flash and I think his ultimate. And he doesn't even use it in the fight or on the fucking Baron. Is this a joke? Like, dude, you are the star player of this team. In that game, you even have a very strong mid pick. You're just not using it. Like, what's great about this game is that game also featured the other moment that just showed what TSM was about this Worlds, where Spica landed one of the best Lilia ults you are going to see in this whole tournament, Dude, if you can't win a 5v5 when the other 5 can't move or attack you, just go home immediately. Just close down the computer, get your peripherals, and just head home. Because they can't even press fucking buttons! What is this? Like, what is it? Go on then, TSM fans. Explain to me what genius move Bjergsen did while his opponents were immobilized and could have taken...
Yeah, you have to do suicide there if you're Bjergsen.
I mean, like, give me a break. Like, guys, I'm with you. He was the best player in the LCS playoffs. In the past, sometimes he has had to 1v9. I even agree on past shows. Sometimes I actually think he was forced into being a supportive player. Like some of the picks he did this year looked like he was just trying to help other people. But this Worlds was definitely not like an acceptable performance. And it isn't like the guy's a rookie. If we talk about Larson, right, we can talk about the fact it's his first Worlds. He's been in the LCS for like, what, a year and a half? Like, dude, Bjergsen was playing in like, what is this, like his 5th or 6th Worlds or something? Like, dude, this doesn't cut the mustard. Like, I'm not saying he's a shit player and should be cut. Like, that's all like fucking sports talk radio stuff. But like, this is mad underwhelming. And I don't want to hear TSM fans just blaming Spica and Doublelift. Like, well, they get their share of the blame, but Bjergsen has to be in this group as well. We can't let him skate now, guys.
Yeah, no, I think he had a bad Worlds. I mean, the one Baron situation, actually, I wanted to talk about Doublelift because I think that like Bjergsen, I think underperformed for what I was expecting. I think Doublelift played so bad at this Worlds. Like, there was
pretty terrible show.
So that Baron. Like, sure, you can like the whole team should have played it better, right? Like it was a clusterfuck, right?
They should
like
have just committed. Let's be real. And that's
sure, but somebody can take the Baron, dude. Imagine being the jungler in that situation. I'm looking at it from a jungle perspective. Imagine you call a Baron, right? Somebody's dead, you call a Baron, and you see your fucking AD carry go and do the Wraith camp. It's so like lackadaisical. It's like, oh, let me just farm these Wraiths, and because he does the Wraith camp, he then instead of just walking to Baron with the rest of his team, he has to walk all the way around the backside of Baron. By the time he gets there, the enemy team is contesting. Then they do like a half turn where Spica's like the only one with a brain who's like, hey, Baron's at 4K, they got no jungler, kill this shit, kill this fucking Baron. And then the whole team turns, half turns, and then he has to smite for HP, so he doesn't even have a smite for the fucking Baron. And then when like the call is clearly, hey guys, I don't have fucking Baron, like I don't have smite, we can't actually like secure this Baron, like hit the fucking Baron. They just leave it and he's auto attacking it with like Lilia and some shit. It's 1 HP, and they ended up like just losing the Baron there. Like to me, it was just so disgusting. It's like, how is that not a point of urgency for you, where you're like, hey,
also mate,
we gotta fucking kill the Baron.
Junglers as TSM fans for all these years, then you get one who not only I agree with you, mate. I thought overall, and you consider his team, he played all right at Worlds. His first fucking Worlds. The guy wasn't even a pro until this split.
He performed the best.
Yeah,
he performed the best.
Spica did well.
I was actually fairly impressed. If I just look at the end of the LCS playoffs and Worlds, he actually might have a future in TSM. I thought before they have to replace him no matter what. But I will say this, you can't have years where you blame the jungler, and then the jungler makes a call like you're saying, because obviously he was telling them to do it and finish the Baron Dom. It's just obvious.
He's the only one hitting it. He's the only one still hitting it.
They'll just leave him out, hang him out to dry. That is disgraceful. Like, that's not even a team at that point in time. You're just going to fucking bail on the guy.
It's so triggering. It's so triggering to watch.
Give me a break.
It's so triggering to watch.
Oh, it's very strange. Like I expected, like I thought LGD and TSM would be similar in terms of how, like the approach to the game would be. Because Shie, I thought, in looking at how Bjergsen came into the tournament, now everyone spoke about him and how he performed in the LCS. Shie managed to do what I expected Bjergsen to do. Shie against LGD, like single-handedly, just controlled that game and won that game. And I know, just to play devil's advocate, that the current mid meta isn't too exciting for mid laners because at this tournament we have like Chovy, Showmaker, BDD, Caps, and even these guys aren't doing anything really spectacular. This just isn't the meta for mid laners to be like that superstar right now. It's all about the jungle. But I think the issue in TSM, it's beyond pointing to just players, because there is just no soul, no identity, no idea in terms of, no vigor or stamina in terms of wanting to win the game. And I think that was evident as the play progressed, because finally that Lucian game, it looked like they had some life in them, and then everything, like all that hope was just shattered. And I think the saddest part is, if you look at FlyQuest and Team Liquid, these are two teams that actually made changes. They progressed throughout their bootcamp. They actually learned some of the ideas and added to it. Like I was watching LCS.
If they were in that same group, right? If they'd have had TSM's group, I would have liked to have seen one of those two teams.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I think odds are probably they wouldn't get through anyway, because I think Gen.G and Fnatic, but probably not 0-6. I think
Yeah,
Just
agree.
Just the approach to level 1 is something that they adapted. The involvement of support, they added layers to it. Igna was playing well. JJ was playing fantastic. You could see obvious growth and what these teams took away from the bootcamp. With TSM, I saw nothing. I just saw the same exact team, which everyone kind of predicted that, in all honesty, that these things would be, attacked and this would be a problem. And you should be able to see this from inside too.
Yeah, I definitely think you should be able to see it from inside, but at the end of the day, it's like, if you have such like a defined style that ends up getting you to the World Championship, it's probably extremely hard for them to ditch it, because if they played normal, like when they played drafts that were more standardized, they didn't have an insane win rate in NA. Like a lot of the games that they ended up winning were on the Zillion, we're on Spica's in Italy, those types of picks. We're on the Blind or Con. Like
jungle shed and shit that no one was playing at the time. Yeah, they were all gimmicks.
Yeah, like they had a bunch. So when you take that away, they're just not that good of a team. So then like when they get there and it's like, okay, like can they actually even adapt? Like I don't know if they can actually just play like standard. Oh, let's just play like Prio mid, will play whatever to get Prio mid, Syndra, Orianna, etc., Lucian, whatever, and then we just play that with the Renekton Italy. Can they snowball through top like the other teams? Because the other teams have that down to fucking like science. Like you watch Canyon play with like Nidalee around a top lane like Camille or Renekton or anything like that. He understands like, okay, I gank now, okay, take Herald, dive, we like 3-man him if we need to. Like they just understand the situation, place the Herald, get your 2k gold lead. It just looks so like practice. Whereas TSM, when they had situations like this in NA, there would be all these times where they would just randomly throw, right? They would start Rift Herald 4v5, or they'd pull too many people to the Rift Herald and they'd lose plates. Like, it just doesn't seem like they had it down to science like the other team. So I don't even know if they would have been good enough to adapt to that style and actually be able to win, because at least what other teams were playing were more standardized in NA. Like, when you look at Jensen's champion pool, Power of Evil's champion pool, even though there are some things missing, obviously neither of them, I don't think, played Lucian mid, which is a huge thing for NA. No one was playing Lucian mid. It was being played everywhere else in the world, and no one here played it. And then you get to an international tournament where it's like a must ban for most teams, and you don't have it worked out to like play all the AP junglers with the Lucian and everything. You end up just at a disadvantage from it. But for me, when I look at it, at least the other teams had like the same ideas around champion pool. Like it felt like this was when they started realizing that Zillion was just a shit pick. Like it took them to this world championship where they're down 50 CS in lane one of the times, and the second time he's playing Zillion into Orianna, GA just like claps his ass level 4, just solo kills his ass, just get the fuck out of my screen. Like that's when it feels like they were just like, oh shit, Zillion is fucking bad. Like we can't play this shit anymore. So I just feel like it was just too late when they ended up catching on to like, you know, all the concepts that I guess other people knew. I feel like they probably had the confidence to think, hey, Bjergsen can play this Zillion to anyone, you know, like he'll always come out of lane evenly and be useful.
I was actually, considering how TSM won the playoffs, I always had this question in the back of my mind if, like the best of fives, all of them that they won against FlyQuest or Team Liquid, those are best of fives that could have ended very differently on a different day.
One game apart.
Super, super close.
Yeah.
And I think we've seen time and time again that winning LCS really doesn't translate at all to the World Championship. And this is so indicative in past World Championships. Like what it takes to win LCS is just so different to remotely be good. I think it's always reflected in like Cloud9's performances at the World Championship when they've done well, whenever Team Liquid has gone there, and they keep doing the same as they do regionally, and it just doesn't translate as well. And I guess it was written in the sand somewhat that this would be the case too with TSM.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think that people had hope because there were games where they at least did have like a somewhat aggressive playstyle. Like they were at least incorporating some of the early aggression into their gameplay, Nidalee, Renekton, things like that they were able to win a lot of games on. So people had hope because they look like the most active NA team, whereas like old TL, if you remember how they were in 2019, 2018, they looked like they were just efficient at beating bad teams, where they would essentially just play consistently.
Just a precise team.
Yeah, they would just play consistently throughout the whole game, and then boom, like one thing what would happen, the enemy team would make one mistake, they'd capitalize, have a lead, they'd never throw the lead for the rest of the game. So at least people had hope for NA because they came in with like a more aggressive style, I guess. But I just think that the picks like just ended up really, really screwing them over. Like they just didn't actually have the the champion pools to go against some of these other players. Specifically, also, I think the balling was a huge issue. I know a lot of people are flaming Biofrost specifically, but I thought Doublelift was really awful at this World Championship. And just like even his mentality, you know, like this guy always talks about, oh, I haven't been out of groups in like 7-8 years. Like I keep on going and I never end up like getting the result I want. And then he just comes in with like, I'm just going to play Senna every game. Oh, I'm playing Ezreal. Like we're playing Ezreal Bard. We get solo killed level 1. Like it just looked so underwhelming. It's like, where's the heart? It didn't look like he was fighting to get out of groups. Like he didn't like leave it all on the fucking rift or so to speak. He just kind of like AFK and was like, okay, losing. That's how it looked to me. It was like, yeah, you know.
Your thoughts on this, Yamato? Because I've got like a rant for this, but I'll wait to unleash. What do you think about Doublelift at Worlds?
No, I'm trying to think of like I'm trying to rank all the bot lanes we had at the tournament, and it feels like in the top 16, and it feels like it's easy to put TSM at 16th place. Because even Unicorns of Love, Gadget had some moments on the Twitch.
I think Machi's bot lane is pretty shit, to be honest. I thought Koala and Bruce, I didn't fuck with them.
Yeah. I guess that's arguable too, right? At least they won one game, right?
Yep.
I believe, against Team Liquid, right? So sure, maybe that's a conversation there. PSG, I think, what's his name? Kaiwing? Is it Kaiwing?
Yeah, Kaiwing.
Kaiwing was smurfing, man. That guy was on fire.
Yep.
So it's like, in that context, it just seemed... I feel like Senna is such a band-aid pick for some, and then you can see clearly good Senna players. Like with Jackie Love plays Senna, it's a different champion than when some other players are playing it, because it's such a... You just get away with so much playing some specific champions. Like you play Ornn top, you hide a lot of your weaknesses. I feel like Senna also fits that category. And I think the moment Senna was off the table and Biofrost was not on Rakan, I think they struggled super, super much on the bot lane. Both of them.
Like, listen, the Biofrost one's easy because let's be real. The guy only got back into the TSM line. This is the move. These are the moves that I hate. It's one thing if you bring up a player and say, right, I'm going to put him in the lineup because he's playing so well, he demands to be played. That's coaching. When you just get to the point in the playoffs where you're like, oh, that's unfortunate because it's the playoffs that I need to qualify for Worlds. But it turns out I can't even use this support player because he plays none of the champions I need him to, and he's fallen apart in the playoffs. Better put in the guy I benched because I thought he was even worse. That's not coaching. That's the opposite of coaching. That's just letting life take turns to fuck you in the ass and going, oh, you as well, sir? Ooh. I'll just pull my fucking bikini to one side for you, this fucking cardboard... like fucking spring break that you've got going on here, Path. Because by the way, remember, this is the other thing about this matchup, is Bjergsen, Doublelift and Path have now all been to Worlds like 3 times. Y'all are the most fucking underwhelming group of people to ever compete at Worlds. Because it's like I said on Twitter, I'll be specific about Doublelift here, right? I made this stat on Twitter where I pointed this out so people understood. Right, Doublelift has been to Worlds 7 times. I'm obviously not including the one in Freak's Basement where Fnatic think they won 1. That didn't exist. But Worlds from season 2 onwards, he's been 7 times, and the last 6 times he had the #1 seed, and he's never gotten out of groups. In fact, I even calculated it. He's only won 15 out of 39 group stage games. Guys, that is fucking appalling. Like he's almost won like a third of the group stage games is what he wins roughly. Like that's the level this guy's on. And my problem with it is exactly what you were talking about there, Dom. I wouldn't mind if he just went to Worlds, if he just like did a Men in Black thing on his brain, forgot that he'd ever been before, just played as if it was a normal tournament, maybe had a bad performance and just went home. But the worst thing about Doublelift, I've even told him this to his face, he somewhat acknowledges it, but then he goes back in the same cycle again. Like this guy acts when he gets to international competition like I'm not joking, like he is traumatized. Because the problem, if people don't know about trauma, is essentially it sort of traps you in the moment of when the trauma was happening to you. You go back to that state and you re-experience it. And that's why, for example, people who've had horrific things happen to them in war or in their like domestic abuse or whatever, like that's why those people, when they think about it or get in that situation, they can't deal with it. Like they get paralyzed or they feel terrible or their mind state, like they're depressed, etc. Dude, he acts like that when he goes to international play because the guy I see play elsewhere is a very good player. Like he has certain flaws in LCS, but he's usually nearly always pretty good. Like by the end of LCS playoffs, he was pretty good. He was one of the best players again. But every time he goes to Worlds, it's like, this is one of the few people I've ever seen where it looks like before he even loads into the first game, he's just mentally broken already. Like these games here, think about how he and TSM played in these games, they played scared even when they had the lead. Like the Baron that they didn't do, that was a joke. The sleep that they didn't, apparently that's not inviting enough. Like at that point in time, like what does Spica have to do? Hire fucking skywriting to do, go in. Like what more do you want then? Like you're just never going, like if you can't accept that fight, you're never going to take a fight, mate. And then the other one is, like I can't remember who it was who showed this on maybe it was Mark Z or something. I think he showed it on Hotline League. That game that they had against LGD where they do the 5-man tower dive at like the bot tower and they just get like 1 kill back out and it like ends up being almost nothing. Like they could have just like continued to go like maybe 2 more kills even. But like the point is they played as though, this is the thing I've always said about Doublelift. If Doublelift goes against who he considers a good player, Ruler, Uzi, Deft, it's like he just comes in and because his whole philosophy is, well, the reason I should always be on top of LCS is these guys are worse than me. It's like he uses the same logic for them and goes, well, they're way better than me, so I could never beat them. It's like, dude, I mean, Yamato, you could talk to this, mate. You were the guy who was trying to inspire underdogs. You can't basically, like, that's where you respect the guy too much. You can't sort of say, well, you are better than me, so you should win. Like, what's that got to do with this game? Like, I'm still going to battle. I'm still going to fight. You've got to have pride in yourself.
No, for sure. I think like the PSG approach was good, I think, in terms of how they approached the game. Like they tried some wild shit to try to gank Nuguri over and over again. And I think like our game when we beat RNG with Vitality, like we ganked Uzi maybe 20 times that game. Like Rise roamed bottom, but he never died. But we kept going. We Sion ulted into bottom side too. We did every dirty trick in the book. Sion level 1 gank and then Tipo into top. Sion ult bottom. Rise ult bottom, Zinzao level 2 gank bottom. We did every single trick in the book. But it didn't work. And then eventually our Draven cashed out on the top laner, which was a blessing. But the speech that I gave my players, I was like, guys, you know, the odds makers are saying that we have bad odds in this game, but the odds of you being born is fucking non-existent. The odds of us being here, the odds of us qualifying to the World Championship is non-existent. We say fuck you to odds. So we go into the game and we just do our best and we play our heart out. We try to do something that will make the difference. Because in the end, especially in the current meta, there are opportunities for you to get ahead. Top Esports lost the game because FlyQuest simply, they just level 1 invaded. The draft from, of course, the guys at Top Esports was silly. They had the Urgot and then they had the Gnar prepared. That was pretty good. That was good.
It was a game that didn't matter, so I think they were probably trolling in the draft.
Yeah,
maybe.
Sure. But still, just the idea. Well, I guess a better example would be PSG versus JDG.
Well, with you on the FlyQuest side, though, I thought they did a very clever job. Like, that was one area, like, as you're pointing out, by the way, this Worlds was one of the ones where level 1's could have the most impact. And there was a lot of, like, gimmicky ones you could do, potentially.
Yep.
And the game is very snowbally as long as you have a composition that you can team fight around and you play around dragons. It's a very, very cookie cutter approach to the game where you can mask the fact, like the skill check usually happens in the early game. That's where like player to player gets measured. Team fights, sure, there are some key moments where Knight pulls off a crazy Cinder stun because it extends because of a wall or something like that. Sure, that happens too. But the bottom line is the individual skill differences matter less and less with time as the game progresses. And I think FlyQuest showed that it's possible. PSG showed that it's possible. And I think you need to come into the game. Sure, you accept your position, but you need to also understand that with your position, you need to bring something different to the table. And this is the whole idea of Vitality. Our entire approach to that year was, there is G2, there is Fnatic. What can we do to disrupt that? And what we achieved, even though we took games over Fnatic and G2 during the season, but what we achieved was Fnatic, even though they were by far the best 2018, they were still scared of us. They didn't want to face us in best of 5 because they knew we don't know what the fuck to expect when it comes to these guys. And this was what we were striving to do. We accepted Fnatic as the top dog. How do we beat them? And that was the whole idea.
Yeah, I mean, I just feel like TSM in general just has no no drive to actually like play from the underdog position. It's just like they all want to play consistently. And I mean, I kind of disagree with what Thorn was saying earlier, where it was like, oh, you felt like Doublelift was one of the better players towards the end. Like I felt like Doublelift was weak the entire year personally. Like I always felt like he was super like uncharacteristically bad.
You don't think he carried any of those LCS games?
I think he played
the Team Liquid series. The Team Liquid series, I think he did well.
That's the only one.
He was looking good, yeah.
But then the other ones, like, I thought he didn't play particularly well. Even, like, the series versus FlyQuest, he's just dying all the time. He doesn't look particularly lane dominant anymore, which used to be the thing, right? If you got him in a 2v2...
He definitely died a lot, for sure, yeah.
Favorable lane, he used to be the type of player that would, like, 2v2 shit on the enemy. But the weirdest thing about that whole Treatz thing is they didn't do what they said the Treatz move was supposed to do. Like, when they put out the information to the community, like... Or when he spoke about it personally in an interview, they're like, why do we want to have Biofrost over Treatz on the team? Like, because of the laning. Biofrost is a better laner. It's like, okay, so we're going to pick some lane dominant team comps, right? We're going to pick some Lux Caitlyn, right? Like, we're trying to shit on lane. That's what we said. Okay, cool. Pick a bunch of Ashe, pick fucking Lux Caitlyn, pick Morg Caitlyn, pick these comps that are designed to lane Kingdom bot lane, get you a CS lead, and play through them. And it's possible. You watch Top do it all the time. They're willing to play around it. You watch Gen.G. They play around their bot lane. They play for strong bot lanes and things like that. But then you look at all the picks and it's like, how many fucking Rakan games did they play? How many times in playoffs were they playing Rakan?
And it's like their equivalent on Biofrost of the zillion picks. It's like, this is working against NA, haha. It's like, that's just because for some weird reason NA players just didn't know how to play against Rakan. Like, props to him, he was doing a good job, but you can't have one pick.
Yeah, and then it's just the same thing that we said. I mean, I got flamed to death for the Rakan pick. I mean, I went on it, I posted about it. I was like 600 comments like, Dom doesn't know shit about Rakan, whatever. Well, we got to see what happened when you pick a Rakan into an LPL team. When TL played into Suning, they went for their Twitch Rakan pick. The Draven was laning in between the first tier and the second tier turrets at 3 minutes into the game. So that is where they decided to lane for the rest of that game. But anyway, just in general, it's like, where were the lane dominant picks bot lane? Even when they played the lanes that like should eventually get priority, I mean, they were not even picking good matchups. Like, they're picking Bard into Nautilus. They're not picking Leona over and over again and playing to level 2, kill the opponent. There was none of that. So I just don't even believe like what they're saying. Like, whatever they talk about, it's like, I can't. So the one thing that you told us was that you tried to play with Biofrost because you wanted to have lane dominance, and that didn't happen. So like, why did you actually choose Biofrost? That's where you get into the territory where people are just like, so was it just because he's your fucking friend? Because
that sounds like what it was, dude. Like, if I had to guess, I reckon that genuinely, when they were failing that hard in playoffs, that they just lost faith in Treatz and were just like, fuck it. Remember Bio? He used to be good. What, like, just brought him back for no reason.
Yeah, but then like, even the next series where they're like, you know what? Like, we got Bio back. We're going to, like, lane Kingdom bot lane. They got shit on the next series by FBI and Huhi, but no one remembers it because TSM ended up winning the series anyway. But they got dicked in that series for sure. Yes, FBI threw the game by flashing in on Callista, but he was super far ahead. He's like 4-0 up CS in that game. They got dicked in lane, and they just look like generally weak laners. Like, level 1, you're dying, man. You're dying level 1 on the world stage, getting hit by 2 Nautilus hooks. First one's your flash, second one's your fucking life. That's not acceptable for a world stage game. Like, you can't be dying like that. And then you still have like all the people come balling, and you know they just look so calm. You know, the enemy teams that play against TSM, they look so ridiculously calm when TSM makes their play. When it's TSM's window, dude, that 5-man dive that we talked about, Kramer didn't even flash. The AD carry didn't even flash. He just healed and walked out of that shit. He's like, oh, there's 5 people coming. All right, okay. And then he didn't even have to back off the turret. He just fucking cleared the wave and just recalled afterwards, man. It was actually crazy what was happening. So I would take the double lift I saw in season 6, where it felt like even though he threw the whole game eing into the fucking Victor into Crown and just gets one shot as Lucian, even though that play happened and it's like funny, it become a meme, it's like, holy shit, look at this colossal throw. I like the mentality of that more than this fucking mentality. This mentality,
go for it and failing,
go for it and fail. That's what I want to see out of double lift. I don't want to see this. I don't see how you're ever going to get out of groups if you play like this and you approach it with this mentality.
I think also it's worth having the conversation of Doublelift's year as a whole. Like, in spring, he was terrible.
Doesn't matter.
By his standards. And in summer also, he kind of skated by. And we've never had a year of Doublelift that has been the case, you know? Yeah. I think always it felt like in North America he was driven by something. And there was either, you know, I need to beat TSM up. I'm now Team Liquid, and he was driven by something, and you could clearly see it. You know, he had, you know, a reason to prove something time and time again, and maybe that's just been lost. And even though we can have the conversation and speculate about mentality, maybe the issue at hand is just maybe
Skill?
he's just wasn't good enough this year.
Sure. But I mean, at the same time, it's like, who do you blame for that? Because it was like, he was good enough last year. I thought he was like pretty good last year, even though
Oh, he's still a solid player.
yeah, the group stage went bad. And then like, you look at, you hear the mentality, right? And that's why it triggers me so hard, because it's like, okay, so if your goal is to get out of group stage, right? That can't be your goal just when you get to the group stage. That has to start at the beginning of the fucking year. So if you're going to go with the whole mentality, haha, 9th place, like spring split doesn't matter, like you say that shit, even when you win summer, you're still being like, you're still tweeting, hey, spring split doesn't matter, like needling everyone. Like, it's almost like you deserve to get shit on at Worlds.
It matters now, doesn't it?
Yeah.
That's the problem with that comment, is that basically, here's the sad thing about that. If this was a sports documentary and Doublelift like won Worlds, that's a baller story that he even called that sprint split doesn't matter and he just mailed it in. But then when it mattered, you know, he turned it on. Like, dude, to say that and you've already, remember, skipped the spring split in the past, to then come to Worlds and go 0-6, like that's shameful.
Yeah, I mean,
And that's another thing, by the way, because I know people are already going to say this, like, oh, why are you just focusing on TSM? Yeah, why would we talk about a Pool 1 team losing every single game in a group that was absolutely one that they had a chance to get out of? Like, why would we go on about that? It's not like you guys went on and on about LGD losing a bunch of best of ones. And then I noticed when everyone was talking about LGD being trash coming into this group, they acted like there weren't any best of fives after that, where they just like 3-0'd motherfuckers. Like, what is this shit? Like the whole point is we focus on the big names. So like TSM doing this bad, that's a big name. They're the champions of the LCS, for fuck's sake.
I mean, it was supposed to be easier to win games in this group. It should be way easier to take a game off Gen.G, LGD, and Fnatic than it should be to take a game off Top. It should be way easier to take a game of those teams than it should be as a Pool 1 seed than it should be for TL to win a game against Suning and win a game against
Even
G2.
actual games tell you that, because as we've pointed out, that second Gen.G game was there in their hand. Like, they had it in their hand 2 or 3 times. Like, that's the best team in the group. If that's the best team in your group, like, you should have been getting out. Like, it was absolutely on the table. I don't even say, by the way, I will say that is a group where everyone in it, in theory, has some level of danger. So it's not easy to get out. Let's not be silly. Like, everyone can beat you. But in that scenario, the only acceptable, like, loss is if they do what they did in the past years. Like, you know, you go 3-3 and then the other guy goes 3-3 and he has the tiebreaker, or, you know, like that would be vague. I could sort of get on board with that. But the idea you lose every game like that is just beyond the pale. Come on, guys. This will go down as the worst result probably ever by a Western team. Like, everyone's laughing, like, haha, Alliance kaboomed. That same tournament, by the way, they perfect gamed a Korean team. Sit on that. Sit on that, TSM fans. You know what you did? You had a perfect record of giving the other team the win, you daft cunt. You did nothing. And then, after crying about junglers for fucking, like, it's like 5 years or something. Remember, Svenskeren joined in season 6. Santorum was there in season 5 when everyone flamed him. Like, the jungle thing's been going on for years. And like we say, that moment on the Baron was nothing to do with the jungler. The jungler was doing everything right, except maybe he mistimed the smite, but his team just
he had to smite. He literally had to smite because of HP. Like, he's actually just doomed in that situation by his team. It was 100% his team's fault. Like, 0% was on Spica. I don't know what else he could have done to make that situation more obvious for his teammates. It's like, hey, we killed the enemy jungler. This is a free fucking Baron. All right, I'm just taking it. Like, I think that the way he did it, like, I love the fact that he didn't even pretend to turn with his team. He knew it was such a bad idea to turn there.
Yeah.
He's like, I'm just going to fucking keep on hitting this shit. If we want to lose, that's like one of those times where as a jungler, you literally you play like the mental warfare with your own team. You're like, no, I am right-clicking the Baron. And like, and if you motherfuckers don't follow, then I am dying. Those are the two options. Either I die to the Baron, like he did. He died to the fucking Baron. Good, I'll whip them into shape. Next time they better fucking hit the Baron because they know that this motherfucker is psychotic. He will kill himself to that Baron if it comes down to it. So respect to Spica. Honestly, I like the way Spica played. That's an acceptable performance. From him, he got screwed over by his lanes. He had no prio, and he still managed to be relevant in every single game. Like, I actually respect that type of play.
Also, I'll give him credit as well. Like, he actually flexed, like, basically the proper champion pool you're supposed to have as a jungler right now. He actually looked like he could play all the picks that he's supposed to. Like, that, you can't blame Spica for these drafts. There's another thing. Like, I know they're just going to do this, because basically, I don't know if you know this term, Dom, it's called Mott and Bailey. It's the principle, basically, that back in olden times, when you would have a castle or a fortress, you have a tiny little area at the front that's like a tiny little garrison where you can have some troops or whatever. And the idea is, if they come to fight you, you start fighting them at the gates, the little garrison thing, and then if you lose that, you fall back to your main castle and you're still defended for a while, right? Well, basically, it's an argumentation tool where what people do, you see it in politics all the time, is they make like a mad outrageous statement, and then when you just point out like, well, that's not right, they just fall back. It's like, well, that's not what I was saying. And then they go back to some like totally reasonable statement that anyone can agree with, and they try and imply that like they were always doing that. Like in this scenario, like if you're someone like Path, the angle's always going to be like, but he wasn't even supposed to be the coach. You keep taking him a fucking world championship, so don't you? Like, I'm not the one making him be the coach. Is anyone else aware of that? Like, I don't have a gun pointed at Reginald, like, put Path in the booth now. Like, you have a choice at the beginning of the year. I know this is going to sound crazy to you, Reginald, but the guy that you hire at the beginning of the year, you're allowed to just keep him and take him to Worlds with you. I know you aren't aware of that. You think it's like Blockbuster Video and he has to be back on Mondays or something like. No, he's yours for the whole year, you daft shit. In the same way as you probably still have to pay all his salary when you fire the guy after one split. Like, there's another area where TSM deserves zero sympathy, right? What's the reason they had to bring Path? Because they originally thought Peter Zhang was the fucking truth. My boys. Listen, Don might like him, but I don't give a fuck. That guy, like, all he did is stand behind Zhao Wei Zhao and go, something in Chinese, like, good. And then after that, he just stood behind, like, fucking Spica and was like, you want to play in the main team, son? That's about all he's done his whole career. Like, has he done anything else aside from that? Like, what's he ever done that made him some coach? And by the way, I'll say it one more time just to rub that fucking salt in the wounds of every TSM fan. I personally met with a head figure at TSM who was one of the decision makers in the off-season of last year, and I told them, I guarantee you Youngbok is available and would probably join if you said yes. They had zero interest, and as far as I know, never even contacted him. Well, how do you like me now, bitch? Youngbok almost took fucking Special and Cries and made playoffs over Fnatic at fucking LEC Summer. Kiss my ass, Reginald. You don't. Wasn't even Reginald I actually talked to. I almost gave that away there, but it was someone else. Basically, it wasn't Reginald. Why the fuck would I meet Reginald?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I feel like it's super weird what goes on in that team because I can understand like you get a really weird coach that doesn't work out and it's just a horrible fit. But how does it happen every single time?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, like there's one-offs. I remember TL had a one-off. We hired this coach Randy. He was like some football coach, knew nothing about league. He was supposed to be like the guy that brings us all together and like brings like he had a bunch of education within. How to coach players and had been doing it for 20 years, but he just knew nothing about the game, and it just didn't fucking work. Like that's okay, but they keep on going for these coaches.
That you hired just for like a couple of splits, that like Korean kid with ADHD or something like this. It was a cool sort of charity initiative, but I always thought that was a bit cruel. Just pretending like he was the coach.
I mean, if we're gonna be real, I think that Loco was probably the best coach that TSM's had.
He was a good coach, you can't lie. He was actually a pretty good coach.
He was probably the best coach that TSM had. Think about like what's happening. He's the only one that was able to actually keep his job. Right? Every other guy, they get one split, and then it just they just get weeded out. And it's so weird how it always happens because it's never like here's our coach, and then like he gets fired, and here's the next coach. It's always like the guy just like becomes like a zombie. Like it's like okay, man. Like what happened to Zix? What happened to Zix, dude? That was supposed to be like the future, right? This guy was known for being a great coach within the context of the day.
I forgot about that one even. Yeah, that was supposed to be what changed the whole culture of the. In fact, that was even supposed to be the one, if people remember, where the logic really went. Right, Reggie's going to finally let the coach do things. He's going to delegate. He's going to give it to Zix because Zix had all success in CLG. He's just going to take over, and I'm going to step back. And you are right as well, Dom. The worst thing about them is they don't just get fired and just go home. They're always like kept on in some mad cockery way by Reginald, and they're always just in those TSM Legends episodes, like just stood silently in the background, just watching. And I can't even imagine what's going on in their minds. Yeah. It's just like, what did I do wrong though? Like, I used to be a coach. Like, shit, like, fuck. Should I say something? They look at Reggie. No, maybe not actually. If I say nothing at all, do you think I can still be here next year? Do you think I still get paid? Like, what are they even thinking about? They're just stood there doing nothing. Yeah. You're right. They just become like the zombie souls of former coaches.
It's
just
so
wandering
weird.
around the fucking coach's graveyard, aka
and everyone that comes in, with the exception of Peter Zhang, every single one was supposed to be like a great coach, right? It was Song, right? Song first. He took this dead Immortals team that was 7th place in spring to second place. Like, they changed one player, Smithy. Like, he obviously was a huge upgrade, but in terms of being a well-coached team, the team made huge improvements over the split that Song ended up coaching. I think he ended up getting coach of the split. They get second place, go to finals, and then go to Worlds from a 7th place team. They get him, he's gone in one split. What the fuck happened to him? Okay, next one, Zixfall. Okay, Zix, this guy won multiple splits with CLG. He was known for being one of the people that could actually raise young talent. Like, he was able to incorporate new people into the roster and get results that no one expected, right? Stixay, Huhi. These players had not had any LCS experience. Their first split, they end up winning NALCS, get second in MSI, and this guy is known to be a good coach. He just disappears too. Peter Zhang was somebody who they had in the system working with the main team for a full year, and then they make the choice to upgrade into the main team, and then suddenly, like, none of the players like him, no one respects him anymore, and then he's just fucking, he's gone the next split. I just don't know what ends up happening, because it's like, for me, I feel like Parth is supposed to be the GM, right? Like, isn't that what his role is supposed to be? He's supposed to figure out which players are going to be on the teams. He's like the scout master.
Should be firing their coach, because their coach is fucking garbage. So Parth, as a GM, could you just fire Parth the coach? Cheers. Thanks for taking care of that.
Yeah, I mean, it's just so weird, and what's super strange about that?
By the way, Dom, the coach of the team also being the GM of the team, his own boss. TSM's amazing, isn't it?
So in 2017, they had that massive collapse at Worlds, and I remember Parth released a statement like, "Yeah, like I just feel like this is my fault, and like I'm just stepping down because I feel like I'm not suited.
I'm not supposed to be a coach, didn't he? Like, I didn't want to be a coach. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so he has that statement, and then he just comes back 3 years later, and he's the coach, and it just makes no sense to me. It's like, why can't...
It's like Game of Thrones.
Yeah, exactly. What's going on?
When Bran just comes in, he said he didn't want to rule, and then he just shows up. He's like, I'm going to rule with his chair.
I can't lie. The way Parth drafted and did this fucking world, he actually probably was like a ghostwriter on the last season of Game of Thrones. You know, that's the way he makes use of all those major story pieces, all those great characters. Like,
yeah, Yamato,
have that Battle of Winterfell just be like a third of an episode or something. Like,
yeah, Yamato, if you ever want your reputation to be completely ruined, you can always go to TSM. They'll make it from like, oh, this guy's a successful coach to like completely worthless within one split. It'll be fucking amazing. Like, I would love to see it. So,
and by the way, just in case
TSM is exciting, man.
You think so?
Well, it might be for you, but here's the thing. Actually, I want to know, Yamato. Do you actually think you could handle it if you went and worked for TSM? Because obviously the main concern is, it ties into kind of what we're saying here. There is a perception that if the players turn against you or Reginald like loses faith, you're kind of out instantly. Like, wouldn't that be like a turn off for you? You think you could handle it?
Like, this might sound arrogant, but I am the most resilient person that I know, and I think.
Right, keep going.
Okay.
I think when it comes to solving problems, like I get excited by puzzles like this. This interests me. I feel passionate about this, and when I feel passionate, I can work sleepless hours and I'll never be tired. And the prospect of working with TSM and solving that situation over there is very intriguing. Very, very intriguing. Like, it's going to happen eventually, right?
Well,
yes.
You mean as in someone's going to do it? Right. Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. No,
maybe not.
I know me, you know.
Like,
maybe not. Who knows? It could just be doomed.
But the stakes are worth it in the sense that if you did make it, you would be a legendary coach, by the way. Like, you would be cemented as like, you could do what all the others couldn't. The only problem is when you say you like puzzles, this puzzle's more in the vein of like fucking Hellraiser, mate, where like, all the Cenobites come and rip your soul apart. So I'd maybe stay away from this puzzle. Just stick to like Jenga or
whatever. I have a question for you, Yamato. At what point do you just have to say no to a fucking draft? Like, because, players will want to play whatever, but at what point do you as a coach end up coming down where you're just like, we're not fucking picking lanes with 0 prio when we have a fucking Nidalee on our team. We're not picking Rakan, we're not picking Zillion, like, all this shit. Where would you come down on actually, like, hard denying your players on a draft?
I think it's a tricky topic because it starts from day one, Day one spring. Whatever they establish from that point onwards, up until the end, everything matters. Because the relationship you establish with your players is what is going to determine your choices that you make there. The way I like to build things is that I am very, very honest with my players. Like over in Sandbox, like let's say we were playing against Gen.G. Like I could honestly tell my bot lane, guys, enemy bot lane is very strong. How do you think we should approach this? How can we avoid our weakness against their strength? And we could have a topic conversation about it because that's what we did from minute one. I think you need to establish a repertoire when, like, you need to be able to be honest with your players about their strengths and weaknesses. You don't want to just pat them and say, you're good. And then you're there in that moment where they're pulling towards a wrong decision, and then maybe pulling them out of that decision will cause more harm in that moment. It's just about how you've built your path up until that key moment where you need to make that choice.
Would you ever let them fail? Would you ever just be like, all right, yeah, play Recon here? And then you watch, it's like, all right, now that's why you're fucking listening to me for the rest of the time. Like, would you ever actually let them get a pick that you, like, think is doomed just to, like, allow them to, you know, like, fully express themselves? You know, like, it's like how parents, right? When they have their kid's first Halloween, they trick or treat, they have all the candy, and the parents sit them down and are like, okay, you know what, you want the candy, eat all the candy. They eat the candy, they get sick, they throw up, and they're like, that's why you're not gonna fucking like eat that much candy again. Did you ever do that approach with your players?
That has happened, yeah, in less important games and in scrims. But usually, I think in most cases, there's a way to convince a player that he's the one making the choice if he's the type of player that wants to make the choice.
Okay.
Like, for example, in Vitality, I had 5 guys that wanted to be, you know, they all wanted to win lane. And sometimes that was tricky. But sometimes the way I convinced the player was like, yo, look at this player. He's doing this with no resources at all. Look at him tanking the ganks. This is the shit, man. This is what I want. This is what a world-class player does. Then I let it like fester like a pot, you know? And I say, okay, I want.
So it's just like psychological manipulation at that point.
It's everything is psychological, right? And with some players, the relationship is different. With some players, I trusted more with making their decisions. Some players I didn't trust at all. Like they're like, oh, my gut feeling is I should play this champion. It's like, your gut feeling. Use your head, bro. This is not good. You know, we need to go in this direction here.
Yeah.
And it all comes down to the player. But I know that from day one, I am building that relationship with my player. Because if I'm in the final game of a best of 5, and that's going to determine our whole season, and I can't tell my player that he needs to pick something else, that is completely on me. And if I'm in a position where if I tell him, I know he's going to fall apart and tilt off the planet, that's also on me. It's all about building that relationship from day one. It's super, super important to have like a long-term view. And I think with how it looks like from outside when it comes to TSM, with how they chose their support, or how, you know, Kobe was removed from the roster and then Doublelift came in, and all of these choices, it felt like, you know, the trust, you know, from outside at least, I'm only speculating, from outside it doesn't look like that trust and that relationship is built to last through problematic episodes. I think every team runs into problems, and you need to be equipped to solve them, and that comes from the culture and also through the relationship you've built from day one.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense. I mean, one thing to get off the TSM topic would be just NA as a whole, right? Like, this is probably one of the worst performances NA's always ever had. Second year that no teams made it out of groups.
It's also a bad group draw in general, though. Like, aside from TSM, everyone else was somewhat fucked. Like, it's actually amazing TL was that close to getting out. Like, props. Like, I didn't think they had any chance in that group.
Yeah. I mean, what do you think is the most glaring thing when you look at NA Yamato in terms of like, oh, this is like the reason that they're losing? Because, you know, everyone just cites a million things every single time. They're like, oh, well, it's our structure. Oh, it's the ping. We don't have the player base. It's like our imports aren't like, you know, able to work as hard because we get washed up players. The scouting system sucks. The management's like, everyone just says a million things. Do you have anything that you're just like, no, this is the main thing that I see?
I think there's plenty of reasons, a lot of reasons. I think first and foremost, when people speak about NA, I still think there are organizations like Team Liquid and Cloud9 that are doing, you know, a lot of good decisions. Like, I think it's very difficult to win back-to-back splits, and then after dropping and your star player not performing in the shape of Doublelift, and then recovering that well and going to the World Championship. That is, you know, props to Team Liquid and Cloud9. Off seasons, they lose players, they bring back players. Now with the departure of Reaper, I'm sure they're going to figure something out too. So I think the conversation of North America needs to be specified to some of the other teams when it comes to the region. I don't think it's like everyone. I think the biggest issue to me is the coaching and the structure within organizations and the mentality that the lower tier organizations have. I've had the privilege of coaching teams that aren't, G2 and Fnatic. So my view has always been, what do I do to challenge G2 and Fnatic with less resources or less claim to players that have names like Reckless or Perks? What do I do? I need to take some risks. I need to be bold in my approach. I need to bring in players that haven't lost over and over again against the top players and expect some different miracle results. I need to be the one bringing in players that maybe in the end, they're going to be the ones playing in G2 and Fnatic, because this is just how Europe functions, right? The best players go over to G2 and Fnatic eventually because they are very aggressive in terms of how they acquire their players. And when I look at some of the lower tier,
I like that.
And when I look at some of the lower tier organizations in North America, they are not providing this challenge at all to the top. It's time and time again the same names that are winning the splits. And new names are showing up now, Tactical and Spica. I think these are names that we're going to see for a very long time. It's very, very easy to see so. And I think when it comes to the discussion of ping and player base, there are many examples of small populations being experts at specific things. Like the example that I always go to is the Republic of Dagestan and how many fighters are coming out of there.
All the wrestlers and stuff, yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, all the wrestlers, they're absolutely like insane at it. And yes. I think there are many clear examples of, small populations being experts at something. And it all comes down to the culture and how they approach things. Sure, population matters, but that matters, I think, when every other variable is completely figured out. It makes things easier, but I don't think it can be used as an excuse. And I think also for the ping, I had the privilege of working with the Tunisian teams, and I know a lot of Arabic players. These are some guys that play like at 100, 150 ping, and they come from backgrounds where, in Arabic culture, like gaming is really frowned upon. Like it's like you have to become a doctor or an engineer, or you're like a failure. So it's like a very, very pressure-heavy culture. And some of the guys that I know, they are challenger in EU West, and they don't complain about anything. It's just an additional challenge that builds character when you want to, create and have better players. Ping. Yeah, 150 ping challenger. Respect. Arabic players. They're playing in Tunisia, in Egypt. They're playing in Arabic countries, and they are doing, well. They're doing bits on EU West. Sure, it matters. I understand that it matters, that the ping is not something that translates that well onto, the practice environment in terms of what you want to achieve. But they had the option of creating in-house, and this is an idea that died rather quickly. I don't know the details as to why, but if I was coaching in North America, I would push for this very, very heavily. Yes. I would chase for this, because I don't think it's a valid excuse unless they come out and say this is why it didn't work.
Yes, you got to try everything that is there. Like that. By the way, One thing that ties into what you're saying, Yamato, is there's certain things you can complain about that are real. Like, for example, ping obviously will make it worse, but you also can't solve that problem right now. Like, we can't all just go live next to the server. So to me, it never makes sense to waste your time complaining about things you can't control. Like, the good thing about things like in-houses and mentality is we can start work on that now. Like, right this second. We can start using new approaches to that. Or, as you say, if it doesn't work, let's prove it doesn't work. Let's thoroughly test it, find out all the ways it doesn't work, and then go to the next solution.
Yep.
Well, just to add, to continue, I think the culture within teams, like I hear horror stories after horror stories from players that I know well about how the practice is approached. They're trying to cage in players and make practice mistake-free. And I think this is also a very, very big issue. I think the teams within the region, if a team suddenly said, I'm going to bring in 5 rookies no matter what, we're going to try to build something, we're going to try to shock the system, I would be like, okay, this is good. They're trying something different. They're not approaching the off-season and signing every name that they know and then just filling the academy roster, and then just like, oh, let's just throw our dice and just see what it lands, no thinking at all. And this is something that we see so frequently. I think it comes down to the approach of the organizations, the use of academy, and how you use it in terms of the system. And I think inherently another problem is, I think the top end veterans, I think an AD carry that is coming up in Europe and he gets to play against Perks, Reckless, and Karzi or whoever. Like Karzi is a good example.
There's loads of talent.
Upset. There's loads of talent, and being able to play against these sets a benchmark, right? This is what you want to reach and achieve. And the veterans that you have within your region also have a big impact on how the rookies become shaped, because this is what the practice is. The top end of the region is what every other team within that region is going to strive towards. When I was in Splice and we were practicing against G2, we were always chasing G2. This was we were learning so much from G2. They were the top dog, and pretty much a lot of what we did came from what they taught us, because this is the lens and the perspective that we see the game from. So when you begin to shock the system, the veterans begin to adapt, and then all of a sudden it's kind of a system that feeds itself. And I've pointed out the many issues that I find within the system, but I think there's so many things that need to be attacked. But I think if I had to choose like gun to head, what would you choose as the biggest issue? I just think culture and decision making within the teams that need to do something to shock the system. Like another one, FlyQuest did good this year. 2 finals, that's good. They had a new approach. They had this whole idea of Sequest and Tree Quest and so forth. That's exciting. They did something different. And I think you just need to do something different. Just keep doing the same shit and expect a different result. Of course, nothing's going to change.
Yeah. I mean, how do you feel about so one thing I tweeted out was just like, I think capping the academy like age would be really good. Making academy like a true like amateur league for like younger players. I feel like that would be really good for our system. Like I was saying, like 24 would be like a good cap, and like you see all these players, right? And you got to be realistic. When was the last time a really hype like 25-year-old player came into any major league and started just popping off? Like we never heard them before. They hadn't been like playing in academy for 5 years or some shit. They were just a new 25-year-old player that came in that was actually, good. I don't remember the last time that this actually happened. So it's just weird that like teams would need rules to make them make right decisions. Like it's in their interest already to make decisions that are beneficial. It just blows my mind that that we would have to set rules. Like it's just socialism or something. It's like a competitive league. You need to make the right decisions. Well, the thing is, people have this like mentality about like academy being about winning academy. It's like you look at these teams and it looks like they're just putting together the best roster they can think of to like win academy, which just ends up being like.
Dignitas one's the best example, right? It was almost all people who were in LCS like the previous year. It was ridiculous. The Dignitas Academy.
Yeah, Dignitas Academy was a huge one. I mean, you have these ones like
Phoenix AD scary.
That really looked like someone was trying to make an LCS team, not an academy team. Like it wasn't going to develop anyone, was it?
Yeah, and then you look at like some of these other rosters like Golden Guardians. How many years of experience do they have on that roster? Top laner Zion Spartan. How many years did this guy play in LCS? You have Hard as Hard as their jungler. He literally played up until season 9, right? Like that was Zion. Hard as their jungler. Played his first LCS season in season 6 and has just been playing academy since then. Keith McBrief is AD carry now. How long has this guy fucking played this game competitively? I mean, for me, it's like I see these types of rosters. EG, for example, had 4 former LCS players on their roster. I just don't get hype when I see those types of like talents, because for me, amateur is almost more interesting. Like I'm more excited about 100 Thieves next and the players like Gen.G and Tenacity. They obviously got moved up, but Gen.G, Tenacity, Copy, like all these guys are just way more hype to me than to see like what Deathlead's gonna do his 4th year as a pro where he's playing academy. Like I just don't see a reason for this. So I mean, I feel like that's why rules would be good, is so that, or even if you don't want to do age, fine. How about you have a max amount of LCS split experience that you're allowed on a roster? Like you can only have 7 LCS splits or some shit worth of experience across your entire roster. So you can't get these players where it's like, oh, you played 14 splits of LCS? Nice, play academy. Where the fuck is that going? Maybe having one player like that is fine. Like where you have one older player and you put a bunch of younger players to like learn from them about the game, like maybe that's fine. But I just feel like it's super cancerous the way that it is.
I do sort of agree with you, Yamato. It's kind of fucked up that like these are people's businesses. Like, why are we having to like force them to do the right thing? Like, this is like if you went one step further, Dom, and it's like now, you know, someone's only allowed like a quarter of like 2 burgers a week, and that they must eat carrots every day. It's like, listen, it sounds great, but like it's kind of fucked up. We have to force them to do it, isn't it? Like, shouldn't these teams want to have good players? Shouldn't essentially but here's the real problem. If a couple of them actually did an awesome job developing talent, everyone's going to go, but Cloud9. It's like, what's Cloud9 doing right now? Shut the fuck up. They did it once. But if people actually did it, like if someone basically became what Mad Lions look at, like you develop talent, you got like a factory of people coming through, like at that point in time, the others will just copy you, in my opinion. Like the first couple of people who do it right, the others, everyone's a copycat league. They'll just do it themselves. So the real problem is at the moment, for some reason, people don't feel incentivized to do it, which is probably a much bigger problem. I'm not even sure what that's based around. Like, but you know,
it's so ripe for the taking. LCS, right? It's like such an opportunity to step in there and really like reinvigorate the region. I think just taking a whole different approach from an organizational standpoint. That's what franchising was supposed to give.
Yes.
Everyone said that franchising, because there's no franchising, we have to protect our investment. We need to take safe bets in order to stay in the league. And now these teams are franchised and they're taking no risks.
They take even less risks
than
than before. They take less risks than before. It's so crazy.
And to speak of the whole role of GM, I honestly feel like in a lot of cases, the role GM is a bit of a joke in League of Legends.
Yep. Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, you have the people that are GMs, and it's like, oh, nice. Like, what's your background? Yeah, I worked for like, the basketball organization as a GM. What? How does that have any impact? Like, so now you're gonna put rosters together, and it's like, well, okay. So then their job is like, no. Well, I don't know much about League, but I'm gonna hire all the right people. How the fuck do you know who to hire if you have no experience within like the ecosystem? I just don't understand how a lot of these teams are built, and even like the people that end up being GMs now, like Papa Smithy, I mean, I think he's done a decent job with 100 Thieves. Obviously had a miss on Ryoma, but he had like good ideas with 100 Thieves next, etc.
Yeah. Took risks.
Yeah, he took some risks, and it's like that guy's just coming from a caster. Like even casters for different regions have better ideas about what could possibly work in our ecosystem than the people that are being appointed to these positions. So it's super strange to me, just in general how teams are, and then also. Amateur League, I feel like, needs to be way bigger in NA, because when you look at Europe, I feel like one of the reasons why the region succeeds so much is because of regional leagues, and there's like tiers of regional leagues, right? Like the best leagues would be like Ultra Liga, and then the Spanish League, German League, French League, like those are like the tier ones, and then you have like other leagues that are under that, where it would be like, for example, like I know there's a Dutch league, and then there's like a Nordic league that combined with the UK league, and there's like these tiers, and there's the Balkan leagues and all that type of stuff. So there's tiers where other people can play, where now it's like academy, and then amateur is a massive drop off. Like when you're talking about amateur salaries, people are making like $500 to $1,000 a month in NA, because even if you win an entire like split of one of these amateur tournaments, the team makes like $6K total. Like that is like the total prize pool split amongst 5 people. So
I actually think as well, by the way, if you look at it, there's another area where franchising did not deliver what the owners who begged for franchising, because remember, LCS was the first one to franchise. What they promised was exactly what YamatoCannon said. Like, because then we'll already have our spots and we can't get relegated. Like, we'll use our academy teams to develop players, and people with the bottom teams, they'll just try new talent. They won't just stick with the old names. Complete opposite. But even worse, franchising actually put NA in the worst no man's land position, which is they didn't go full development, but they also don't have a really vibrant challenger scene. They just stuck between the two. Because I'll tell you right now, Dom, think back to the era when the teams in Challenger were actually being built to one day maybe be an LCS team by winning promotion. There used to be way better teams than these academy teams are now. Like, listen, they cost a lot more money, sure, but like those were way more competitive teams that, if anything, probably do a better job of letting talent force their way into the league. Like, if you played a promotion match and think about the teams that were the bottom of the league, like Immortals, Dig, if you'd have beaten those guys as some up-and-coming AD character, you get your name out there. You can win all the academies you want, mate. No one gives a fuck. No one's watching. Like, I actually think that's been worse for NA in some degrees. Like, some of those teams, that's where the people like the Licorices of the world came from. They didn't, like everyone pretends now. So they weren't grown in a fucking like petri dish by Jack Etienne personally, and him sprinkling in a love and fucking friendship. Like he was on United or whatever. He was on like a team actually trying to get into the league. Like these players had a chance to show their skills, which is what we used to do in Europe, by the way. That's how like half of YamatoCannon's Vitality players came through that fucking Giants team or whatever. They had to fight their way into the league, but they had the chance to do it. So my problem with NA is it's just nothing. Like there's no development, but there's also no way you can actually force your way in the league. So at the moment, if these GMs are all just really bad collectively, you end up with a scenario like now. It's just a mess. It's a wasteland of no talent and nobody looking for it.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at some of the players that are in academy, right? Like, so a perfect example of a player that, you know, when I look at them, I'm like, so what could this guy do to actually get into the league? A perfect example is there's a player on C9 Academy named Diamond, right? He's played 4 splits of Academy, right? He has 2, so he's won the last 2 splits of Academy, like won the championship. He's got first in the regular season in all 4 of them, and he's just like by far the most dominant support in the league. And he's not like, it's like this guy might not even be on an LCS team next year. So it's like normally when you're winning Academy, when you're doing super, super well in this one league, it should be like a no-brainer to take them over somebody like Hakuho, who's you know, just like pretty much perennially just getting
the upside, basically, isn't it? Yeah, like, what's the upside to keeping that guy? You may as well try the other guy.
Yeah, like what, you're getting like fucking 10th anyway, like who cares, you know? Like might as well just get the player that has some, but it's, what do these players need to do to fucking win? What about Palafox? Won the last 2 splits, got first in the regular season, last 2 splits, got rank 1 in NA solo queue. What is he supposed to do? Like, what is he supposed to do to get into the league? He's gotten rank 1 in every single thing he's competed on, including the solo queue ladder. and no one's going to take a look at him. People would much rather take a player like Golden Glue over a player like Palafox, regardless of what the upside was. It's just so crazy to me.
Well,
so
yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And just to add, I forgot to add the final point, just to bounce over that, is just, I don't mind importing at all, but it needs to be with purpose. Like to argue against importing is a big meme, because the best players, the best performing players are all imports. So it's like importing is okay. But
yeah, I think China, with all their world's wins with imports, have shown us like imports can work great if your domestic players are good as well. You know, there's no problem with that.
Or for sure.
I'm with you.
Like JJ, for sure, fucking played really, really fucking good for Team Liquid. Insane what he did this year. I think just in terms of acquiring, like just as an NA org, I would also look at the regional leagues of Europe, and I would take some of those guys, put them in my academy, boom, just place them in there. There's potential. There's a lot of rookie talent that is ripe for the taking. If you don't have that many of these players in North America, okay, then maybe you can develop some from other regions. That's okay too.
Yeah, I mean,
and
we do have players. No, I was just gonna say, like, before you continue your point, like we do actually have players, just no one gives a fuck, and no one, like, you look at Academy, right? And when I tune in, there's like 5,000 people watching. It's like, okay, or 8,000 people or some shit. If that's how many people are watching, you don't know who the fuck is doing well in there. If you just look at like the teams at the end that won, you're like, oh, maybe they have a couple good pieces. But yeah.
Let me challenge you on this, Dom, right? Mm-hmm. What level of team? So think of like the 10 LCS teams right now.
Yep.
What level of team, if I made you the coach of an LCS tomorrow, would you actually gamble on these like academy players potentially for your team? Like, listen, I obviously don't expect you to do it if you're Team Liquid. Like, why would you? You've got better pieces. Like, what sort of level do you think should be looking at these kinds of players? Because as we say, it'd be a gamble, but the idea is the upside's potentially way better than putting in like, don't mash me for his fucking 10th year of League of Legends. You know, like, it's just not, there's no upside to those guys. So what range are we talking about where the team should be considering, in your opinion?
Like anyone, so it depends. Like if you're a title contender, then that's a different thing. But if you're like anywhere from like 5th to 10th, I feel like you should just be looking at these types of players. Like, what's the upside if you're 100 Thieves of playing with players that are like established, so to speak, when you could just be improvising, like, hey, dude, we saw what Ryoma looked like. Why not just have an NA player there? That was what I was arguing for the whole time, right? Now, obviously, OC players are not considered imports anymore, so it would have made actually more sense to use Ryoma this year than it did last year. But
agreed.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to see like players like that. Like, I would like, obviously, I think Hanser deserves to be in the league. But if somebody took Fudge over Hanser, that would be a move where I'm like, that's an exciting move. Okay. Like, that's kind of the same thing as what C9 did all those years back when they took Licorice. They took an extremely dominant that player that looked like they had good fundamentals in Challenger, moved them onto a top team. I mean, if your plan is to try to win LCS, then yeah, a player like Someday is good. But if you're going to be in 7th place, like yeah, just fill it in. I mean, we saw Poom come in. I would love to see Tenacity play. I'd love to see Kenvi play. I'd love to see Palafox play. I'd love to see Diamond play. I would even love to see Revenge play. Like, there's so many of these talents that it just feels like they're just in academy hell forever. You know, it's just like, oh, well, if you're just, it's almost worth to not be in academy if you think you're actually really good. Do the solo approach where you go to Europe, you go to Korea, you practice, you try to get your name out there, and you don't even like subject yourself to that bullshit of playing for nothing. And then the worst part is like you play for nothing, but then if you lose and you're not on a top team, then people just assume you're shit because they don't even watch. Dude, there's talents that we've had. I mean, Revenge is a perfect example where just because his team is like terrible, people don't even consider him as an option for any of these teams. And then we have players that are playing where it's like, there's no, I don't care what you say, there's no way that I think a player like Alorum for Immortals has more upside than Fudge or Revenge or any of those players that I was listing off. Like, there's no way you can make that argument to me. Like, you have a tank-only player compared to like these guys that can actually play carries. What the fuck is the point? Like, what the fuck is the point of playing with a like bad version of Impact if you're not going to get anywhere anyway? I don't know. But yeah,
I'm with you.
Yeah, I mean, I just hope that next year we actually see like, and honestly, like I don't know how you guys feel about this, but I feel like the overinflation of salaries actually like kind of doomed NA, and I would love to see teams actually just take risks and play with cheaper rosters. Like, I don't think every roster needs to be $2 million or some shit in order to compete. Like, yeah, I mean, why not just like actually pay for what you're getting? Like, if you're going to be a 7th place team, why the fuck are you paying your top laner $800K, $900K a year? It doesn't make sense. So, yeah.
I think those are also pertinent things to bring up, because the difference is if you put the right person as GM, they can start fixing that tomorrow. Fixing things like the ping and the entire culture and how do Americans view jocks and nerds, like that's all well and good as like discussion topics on a talk show, but realistically, those are enormous topics to tackle. Like, I'm more interested in what the things people can start doing today. Like, if you actually were TSM and you thought about like, what could you change tomorrow? That's probably the stuff you need to start doing.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so I guess the last thing that we could talk about here is just some of the matchups for quarterfinals.
Yeah,
I mean, we talked about pretty much like how the group stage went. I
want to start with the most obvious one, which is interesting to me, which is like, listen, even though like, I'll give everyone a spoiler, there's no real point talking about Damwon Game versus DRX. That was already the final. It was garbage. But like, one of the interesting ones to me is I want to know, because obviously people who are Westerners want to believe in the Western team. So I want to know from Yamato, do you actually have any faith Fnatic can do something here against what is essentially the de facto #1 team potentially in the world?
Not really, no. I think everyone's high on best of one juice, as always. Like, you can take a trip down memory lane and you know that group stage performance is next to meaningless. You can take some pieces of information, you can see what people can replicate, and you can see with the amount of vigor that they are playing in as well. I gotta remember Lungzu and 6-0, and everyone's excited about them, and they got smacked down by Samsung. We saw IG drop games against Fnatic in their group stage, and then 5 games against KT. We saw FPX lose against Splice and then win the World Championship. It is time and time again the same. And if I'm looking at top esports, I'm looking at them in the same light as I did at the beginning of the tournament. I think they have the strongest players in the right positions. I think, sure, it's a bit trickier now because mid is less useful than it usually is. But I think coming into this matchup, the biggest difficulty that Fnatic will have to overcome is the fact that top esports will control mid and will be first on everything. And that is always the harsh truth that you need to face when you're a team that plays through bottom side and manages to mask these issues through drafting, which is something Fnatic managed to do so well. I think Fnatic individually, in terms of how the meta is right now, the stars are aligning. I think Hylissang's champion pool is perfect for it. Whipple in his playstyle is perfect for it too. Selfmade is perfect for the current meta. I think Fnatic definitely can take a game I think if they get the right draft, but I'm worried what will happen when Nemesis is forced to go deeper. He was forced to go deeper once at this tournament. He picked the Lulu. I wasn't excited about it. I saw in an interview, Reckless was talking about how Lulu, they wanted to try it as a counter solution. Okay. The last time it happened, we saw him blind pick Corki twice. And it's just not something that I think can fly against top esports. I think still, due to the nature of the meta, I think Fnatic can mask the fact that they've isolated Nemesis for the entire year in the way that they play.
Yeah,
that was actually one point I wanted to make, because basically there's another reason why the best of ones will fool you if you think that that's how playoffs is going to go. Because in the best of ones, the only champions that Nemesis won on was Orianna and Lucian. Now let's go back to LEC playoffs. In the 6 games he won out of the 11 Fnatic played, he won 5 of the 6 on Lucian and Orianna. Like, these are his band-aids. This guy was one of the worst mid laners in LEC for the summer split, but they found the right band-aids, they worked, and he was actually looking good on those champions. So even though the group stage opponents, for some reason, just had no interest in pushing him off these champions, I actually think this is where top esports can just shut this entire series down before it even begins. Because there's 2 ways they can go. They can either say, which is what I actually think a lot of the teams, the Asian teams, did against Fnatic. Their logic's kind of counter. They're thinking, well, we don't need to ban these things because we've got the picks that can counter it. Like, we have all the mid lane, like, think of all the players we're talking about, people like BDD, fucking Knight. They have a billion picks they can do. So their logic goes, well, we don't need to sort of ban these things up. We'll have an answer for it. But if they ever actually figure out, but wait a minute, but if we do ban them, he's fucked completely, that's when it will just be a 3-0. Like, in that scenario, I have really low hopes for Fnatic. So basically, if you're a Fnatic fan, you better pray they don't actually try and target ban Nemesis. If they don't, maybe there's a game here. Because I actually think if Nemesis gets those champions, the players who can do some work here are the fucking support and the jungle, in my opinion, Fnatic. Like, I actually think the support on top is far and away the worst player. And Selfmade has looked like one of the best players in the whole tournament so far. So the way they do from jungle, I could see them doing work. But there's a lot of ifs there, you know, before I even get to the winning the game. So personally, I think top esports probably going to just sweep this series. Yeah. I'd like to believe it'd be fun, but I don't think it's going to happen.
So let me tell you the cheat code against Fnatic, because I'm pretty sure people just haven't figured this out yet from the bans, is you don't ban Evelynn, you just ban the Lucian. And then you just play one of the prio junglers. You play Lilia, Graves, Nidalee, any of these picks, and you just let him have Evelynn, and you play something that counters it. He's not going to even pick it a lot of the time. Like, they'll probably play Graves before they'll play the Evelynn. And I feel like people are so traumatized from those Lucian Evelynn games that they've started banning both. But if you watch, like, the game, even the TSM game, it's not like Evelynn is gonna, like, just snowball the whole fucking game from minute 1. Like, the champion takes a while to actually turn on. So I think that the way that you approach Fnatic is you just you ban Lucian, and if you want to ban something else, if you want to ban 2 picks from mid jungle, then you go the Orianna ban too, and you just force him on something that he's not comfortable on, because Evelynn wants to be playing with AD lanes so that she's just able to do more damage. If people can easily itemize MR, the champion becomes a lot worse. So you just try to make them play things like Syndra mid. If you force them on Syndra Eve is not super threatening. You can itemize Merc Treads on a lot of these mid laners, and you'll just be fine in the lane. So I think that there's a lot of things that you can do in terms of exploiting Fnatic's champion. One thing that I wanted to touch on, though, is that, like, Knight has just not been looking good this tournament.
He's actually been a bit underwhelming, hasn't he? What's funny is, I actually think the 2 players who've kind of underwhelmed me this tournament is actually Knight and BDD. It's like, these guys have just been all right for most of the games. Like, what the fuck? Yeah, I mean, these 2 were going to be studs, just popping off every game.
Yeah, I think BDD has been better than
even
Knight.
Though, with his group, mate, I thought he was going to murder that group. I thought, dude, this guy's just going to go off and get like a fucking million KDA. He's just okay. You know?
Yeah, I mean, I just think the Knight's been weird. Like, the Nocturne pick didn't look like it did anything to me. I mean, where was the Zoe, man? Like, Zoe is such a good pick right now in a lot of situations. If the enemy picks Orianna, why not just pick the Zoe? It just feels like he's just not playing the things that he's super good on, and it just seems weird to me.
I just feel like that's the case for every mid laner, no? I don't think any mid laner stood out like, wow, above and beyond, this guy is fantastic. It just feels like that's the nature of the meta that the teams have agreed upon. Like, when Galio is being picked and when the jungle meta is Nidalee and Graves, it's no longer about the mid laners. And I think like even Caps is also like there's some question marks about like he's always taking decisions and sacrificing his lane in order to gain information for Jankos, and then his lane is kind of over and it doesn't work. That happened. Everyone criticized Caps for the game between Suning and G2 when he played Syndra into Akali. He had Lilia jungle, so that's terrible. Akali has Mercury, that matchup is finished. What he did during the lane phase was Syndra walked all the way up to his golems on red side and then walked all the way back.
Yeah, and checked the golems during the invade.
And Graves wasn't there, and Graves pieced out, and then Akali pushed in for free, was 10 CS ahead, and the matchup is completely over. There's no turning back if you're playing against a decent player, and Angel is a decent player. And I think this is just the state of the meta. I don't think we are at a World Championship where mid lane is going to be super exciting, even though the mid laners that we have are really, really insane, which is super disappointing. It's super disappointing.
I feel like they're just not picking the things that make the most sense for their teams. Like, I don't think that mid lane is just super doomed or anything, but when you look at how G2 won LEC, right? It was Caps on a fucking mage every single time. Zoe, Syndra, Orianna, etc. He built a Magi's every fucking game, got 7 million kills, 25 stacks at 14 minutes into the game, just completely 1v9'd, right? And then when they came into this World Championship, it's so weird how they adapted, where they're putting Jankos on all the carries. And then, like, you look at Caps' champion pool, it's Jace mid, it's Galio, it's TF, it's all these picks that are like more supportive champions for the team, where they're just like role players. Like, obviously when you pick the Jace mid, you're just playing it so you can have an AD mid to allow your Nidalee to be the sole AP threat, and it just doesn't make sense. I would love to see G2 just see how far their actual playstyle will take them in this tournament. I don't think that they'll win playing like these, you know, playmaking junglers, because I don't feel like that's like the best read on the meta possible. But I feel like they're so much better at that type of style when Caps is the main threat of the team, when he's playing the mages and you're playing through him, than when the whole game's around Jankos. Like, I really don't like seeing Jankos play Nidalee and Graves. Like, I don't feel like that's the ticket for G2 winning the tournament. So yeah, I just want to see teams default more to like what got them there. Like, there's nothing you can say to me that'll make me believe that like Zoe is just unplayable right now. Like, you just can't play this champion and just do Zoe things. Like, this champion has to still be strong. I mean, they didn't nerf the lane phase of it. Like, why is it to the point where none of these really good Zoe players, where every, like, if you look at all the teams, right, JDG, top, etc., they were first picking Zoe in some of these games in LPL playoffs. They were first picking it. That's how strong it was. And now it just fallen all the way down where it's like, no, it's unplayable. It just doesn't make sense to me. I don't know.
I think Zoe is decent because Zoe can fit the role of just playing hard for prior 1-2-5. It's just, I'm kind of hoping that the meta pushes us in a way where there is a handshake ban on Lilia, Nidalee, Graves, and then we're back to the fun meta again, where it's 3v3 mids. It's all about the 2v2 mids, all about 2v2 setups with the volley bears, with the sets, with the dirty Lee Sins, and whatever you can think of. This is what I want to see, and this is where, even still, the top teams at this tournament can deliver really, really high-level gameplay. When we think of top esports, so Damwon, this is what they were really, really good at, and Damwon is still really, really good at the farming meta, but I'm kind of hoping that people just agree to ban these champions. I know that the European teams will probably just remove Nidalee because they just refuse to play it or can't play it, and that's one out of the way. I'm hoping the two other will fall like pittance too.
Yeah, same. So there's a couple interesting matchups to talk about. I mean, we were talking about G2 a little bit individually, but G2 versus Gen.G, that's just like, the classic matchup that G2 will just end up coming out on top of. But going into
like they're just inevitable to win that somehow. I don't really know how, but they're going to win that, aren't they?
But we can agree that they should theoretically be underdogs coming into this match with how Gen.G have looked and how they've looked. So do you guys still just believe that G2 is going to end up winning the series, regardless of how best of ones looked?
I worry about Gen.G in best of fives. They lost Coach Edgar this year.
Yep.
And I believe Coach Edgar was a part of the two World Championship victories that they had under the Samsung era, of course. And looking at Gen.G's best of five track record this year, they got 3-0 by T1. They lost to DRX, and then they beat a very, very low-level T1 because they had their own issues to deal with. So their best-of-5 track record is not something that I'm ready to put a lot of faith in. And when you look at G2, I believe they've played 8 best-of-5s during this year, and that is a lot of freaking experience with the same roster, also coming in from last year. They've been in situations like this before, and I think Gen.G can't be clean enough to just sweep G2. I think this is a best-of-5 that is going to go and become dirty, and I think G2 love it when it's dirty, and I think Gen.G is not good in those zones.
No, I have a similar thought. Basically, of all the Korean teams, this was the worst one to match against G2 if you wanted the Korean team to win. Like, Gen.G is way more in the vein of the boring Korean team that's predictable. Like, you know what they're going to do, how they're going to play. Like, they want to play a clean game. Like Yamato says here, if G2 can make this chaotic, that's exactly what they want. I also think you've got to throw in what makes G2 super unique. This is another area where the only comparison I can draw is like Moscow 5/Gambit. They're the only Western team I have ever seen where I actually do believe some of the Asian teams, specifically the Koreans, have a psychological disadvantage. Like, they actually are afraid of the fact they don't know what you can do. That's unpredictable. That you don't know what player they're going to play through, how they're going to play in the game. Like, I can imagine, dude. I wish everything that you saw didn't have to be on camera, so it had like the whole aspect where people are second guessing what people think, what they're saying. I'd love to know for real what Koreans thought about that SKT series where G2 gave up like every fucking dragon and then still won the game. Like, that was ridiculous. Like, some of that stuff. Like, I'd love to know how Koreans handled that. Like, as in genuinely, because I'd imagine that must have been like, fuck, do we just not know anything about this game anymore? Like, does it just not work the way we thought? Like, that's actually intimidating. And so it's funny that if you're a Westerner, you always feel like G2's like hanging off the edge of the cliff about to fall off because they always fuck around in the group stages. They always lose at least one game to some team that's way worse than them. In Europe, in this case, they had all the games against Fnatic and Mad Lions that made you doubt. But like, I think if you're actually an Asian team, that's more terrifying, is that you don't even know what G2 is going to turn up. Is it the one that I could beat easily? Is it the one that's going to be a complete nightmare for me? Is Caps going to pick Oriana and just be normal? Is he going to pick a champion we're talking about, just style the entire game? And in fact, throw that in as well. Nobody else has players like Caps. The only player, in my opinion, comparable relative to his role is what Selfmade can do in Fnatic. Beyond that, there are no players in the Western world that people are like, fuck, I hope I don't play that guy. People are scared of Caps, I guarantee you. There are Asian players who are like, dude, he can do that shit to us.
Yeah, I mean,
there's a lot that goes in Jisu's favor. A lot of it's intangibles, you know, but I think it's real.
Yeah, I think the part that scares me about G2 would just be bot lane. I feel like bot lane is a rough matchup for them. I think Perks and Mickey just don't look anything like they did last year. I mean, they're really prone to just chain inting and dying a lot in lane phase. And, you know, Life and Ruler were known to be just 2v2
very
killers.
Good bot lane, yes.
They were known, like, and they're not just a bot lane who's like going to sit back and be a very good bot lane by like playing Caitlyn and Lux and pushing you in and taking some plates and rotating around the map. Like, they play lanes to kill you. They play set support every fucking time they can get it. They play Gragas support. They play whatever they can to actually just murder you inside the lane. So I feel like if G2 were to lose to Gen.G, it would probably be on the back of that. Or if G2 just double down on playing Jankos on Nidalee Graves and having Caps be like his support the entire time, then I feel like it could go the other way.
I think when it comes to Gen.G, my biggest worry about them is that their group stage performance was not impressive. I feel like they've lost the idea of what makes them strong, because when we faced them in the LCK, the big fear was them just having mid-prio, diving you one-time bot, and then just choking you out completely. Reminds me a lot of I believe 2016 H2K, where Forgiven was playing, and then they took one tower, and then they just knocked everything down, and you just got choked out completely, and they just never gave you an opportunity to come back. This is not the story of Gen.G in group. And I made the whole claim about how, of course, group stage isn't showing everything, but I think this group was unique because it really pushed the limits of all the teams within it. They were forced to make changes. They were forced to adapt within it. Not like some of the other groups, like the top esports group or JDG group with Damwon. They didn't get pushed to any limit at all. It was already set in stone who was going to get out of those groups. Gen.G didn't look clean at all. They played heavily through topside because they picked that Nidalee when it was with the Renekton and so forth. And I think in a world where they play mid into bottom 3 games, I still can see a world where Gen.G win this, because the key difference for me when it comes to G2 in this World Championship in comparison to last year, I think there were some categories where I could place them. They are the best at this. They are the best at this. They're the best at this. I can't do that this year. They have good performance in Mickey, Wunder, Caps, Jankos, and Perks are questionable, but at the same time, these are very high-level veterans that know how to regain traction and have 2 feet on the ground within the span of a week because of the experience that they have. But coming into the whole World Championship in context of that, they're no longer the innovators. They're not leaders in terms of what is supposed to be played. This is something that was last year. They're no longer the best when it comes to the mid to late game decision making. They're quite imprecise, and I would say the top esports and down one are much, much more precise in terms of making these decisions. So this is my biggest worry about G2. There's been a serious decline in what is considered their strengths, and I think this meta has kind of killed innovation in a sense. Which I understand. I don't blame them. But coming into the rest of the tournament, I still have worries for G2. Even though I predict G2, I can still see a world where Gen.G just smashed them the same way they smashed Fnatic in that final game.
Yeah, I think the game's just also changed where it's not as much about like counter-picking bot lane, playing all these weird picks. It's more just like a 2v2 war inside of the lane. It's like, okay, like we're just gonna like who's the better player? Like here's like an Ashe, here's a Jhin. Like it's skill shots. It's about like how you play in terms of reacting to like 5-mans, and I feel like that's just never been what G2's strong at. Whether they play with Perks or Caps bot lane, it feels like they're always best at like the self-peeling ADs and things like that, where they're able to actually like outplay individually, but not as much about like, oh, like how do we play around an AD carry in general on a team, which, you know, like last year, you know, that was masked by Xayah, that was masked by Kai'Sa. I'm really scared for like all these like Ashe versus Jhin lanes if that becomes the whole meta for the Gen.G series, because you know, you see Perks even when he's playing Ezreal, he gets caught way too much at the beginning of fights, and he'll just die. Like the game versus Suning, right? He even TP's mid, gets like 2 free kills, should completely take over the game from that point. Just gets hit by random abilities and just dies. He's getting hit by a Nautilus hook as Ezreal when he has his E up. And it just becomes like a clusterfuck of a game. And, you know, when you look at the top teams in the world, once it hits 30 minutes, it's much more standardized front-to-back team fights, better AD carry wins. Like when you watch top play, you hit 30 minutes, Jackie Love has his like 3 items, his Rapid Fire, his Mana Moon completed, his Merman completed, his Ghost Blade, and he just starts like taking over the entire game, and you can trust him to like react and react to flanks and things like that and carry the fight himself. Where it's scary because G2's just never played like that. They've kind of just played like with 5 individual players. They don't have like the standard front to back like crisp team fighting that even some other teams have, and that's why I feel like Fnatic has looked the best into G2 this year than they've looked before. I know even though the final was like 3-0, they did actually get a series win over G2 because I feel like Reckless is just better at that type of AD playing. Like, you know, if a Malphite flash ults you out of nowhere, who's going to be able to like flash it first? Like, who's going to be able to position themselves and deal damage most effectively at the same time? That's like what I feel like this meta is about. So yeah, I mean that's the Fnatic series, and the we talked about the Fnatic series, the G2 series, and the top series. The last one is Suning versus JDG, and we'll just do this real quick before we wrap up. What are your guys' opinions overall on JDG versus Suning? Because coming into this tournament, I would have said that JDG would have been a massive favorite over Suning, but JDG's drafts have been so fucking weird for me in this tournament specifically compared to what they normally played in LPL. Love to get your guys' opinions on if you think that, you know, this will be closer series than what we would have expected before, if it will just be a JDG stomp.
I feel like Suning is a bit of a dark horse coming into the tournament. I think SOFM did things that I don't see anyone else doing. I suggest everyone just watching and just paying attention to what he did against Jankos when he was 3-0 up as Lilia. The things and the decisions that SOFM did in terms of just saving time and being efficient and finding camps, squeezing water out of stone and getting ahead somehow, it was really, really mind-blowing. But I think in the context of JDG, I just feel like this group stage, they took it as a joke. And that's, of course, a feeling. I'm only speculating, but picking Sylas jungle, Come on, man. This is a piece of shit champion. This is a champion.
That was trolling for sure. He wasn't doing that on purpose, guys. He was trolling.
I mean,
like
the pathing was
to me, that's
grief.
spitting on the enemy, you know?
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think the pathing was super grief. You imagine you pick Silas Jungle and you go blue into Grump. That's your fucking clear. It's like anyone who's played Silas Jungle before knows how miserable that clear is if you go blue into Grump. Like you have no healing from your talisman. You literally die to your fucking camps. So yeah. Pretty rough.
So it's like I didn't feel like they gave a damn. And when I look at JDG's year as a whole, I look at their players, I see that they have Lumao, Loken, and they have Kanavi, and of course Zoom, and then Yagao finally. I think this is a roster that is monstrous. And something important to note as well is these LPL teams have faced off against each other many, many times. SOFM is very unorthodox in his approach to the game, but Kanavi has experience playing against this. The only reason I'm putting Suning as a dark horse is because they ramped up towards the end of the season. They lost against Top Esports. We haven't seen JDG versus Suning in a best of 5. So I think there is still some room for, Suning to cause an upset because Bin has looked fantastic. I think also Angel has a lot of potential. I'm a big fan of Sword Art and what he's bringing to the table. Sometimes he runs it down, but that's just support life. And I think there is some room for exploration, but just the matchup against JDG is just so tough as your first best of 5 because these guys know you. LPL teams know each other super, super well. And that's why it's so sad to see this matchup because JDG is going to play very different against Suning than they would against any other team. And I think this format doesn't do justice to how teams actually match up stylistically against each other. And that's why it's once again so sad.
Yeah, I feel like it's just the worst opponent. Oh, yeah, well, it's just the worst opponent that
Yes,
I feel like
that's what I was going to say basically.
Could have got, right? Like if they got anyone else, you'd have if it was Suning, and then they obviously they're 1 seed, so there's no way they could have got Gen.G. But if they did match up against Gen.G, I feel like that would be much more winnable for them, even though JDG's kind of looked like shit. But you even saw when JDG had a normal JDG draft, like they had the second game against Damwon, they ended up winning the game. Like that, that's a JDG draft, man. Like they play junglers that actually can do something. They don't play this fucking Silas bullshit. They play junglers that can do something. They play Camille top, and they actually come and fight you over and over again, and they can take a win from you. So I don't know. I just think it's really sad that JDG ended up losing that game versus PSG because I would have loved to see a tiebreaker between Damwon and JDG if they were both going full force.
Basically, for Suning, I think it's very unfortunate when you consider this a team that won the group. I agree. Of the 3 teams they could have gotten, so it could be Jingdong or Fnatic or DRX. I actually think Jingdong is the worst. It's a domestic rival. As Yamato says, there's no mystery at SOM.
It's the best second seed,
difference is, I'd love to see Pioshik have to play a best of 5 against a player like that. That's going to put him well out of his comfort zone. So even DRX wouldn't have been bad. Obviously, Fnatic, they'd have even been favoured potentially against. This is a team that, no joke, with the right draw, might have been in the semi-finals. But sadly, I do think they're just going to get rocked by JD. JDG's just got too many good players. Their player strength across the board is so high. They know their playing style. I think they're going to murk them personally. I don't think it's going to be that great a series.
Yeah, I mean, I hope it doesn't go like that, right? It would suck if it's just JDG just 3-0ing Suning, and then you just have Damwon 3-0ing DRX, which I think that one that we haven't really talked about that much. I feel like that
don't really need to.
It's not even worth talking about. I feel like Damwon is so good in general, compared to Dragon X, but even worse, I feel like they stylistically counter Dragon X because Dragon X's strength, right, is all in Chovy, and Chovy actually can't really outmatch Showmaker. That is very fucking close. That's pretty much a stalemate right there. So you take away their huge win condition, and then when you go topside, Nuggery and Canyon.
They've got the way better players, when I watch DRX play against Damwon Gaming, it's actually sad because I'm also a fan of Chovy because I think as a laner, he's a fucking genius. He's one of the best I've ever seen. But the problem is, him against Damwon is like when fucking LeBron was trying to play against those Warrior teams with Durant. It's it doesn't matter how good you play, mate. You can't do it on your own. So if you haven't got any help from your team, you're just going to lose. I even think in that finals, Chovy looked just as good as Showmaker, but he had zero chance to do anything with it.
Yeah, I think Showmaker is I feel like for some reason, because Chovy is so 1v9 on his team, it makes Showmaker kind of underrated in a way. Where I feel like Showmaker is super insane. I don't think that Chovy is much better than Showmaker, or even better at all. I'd say they're very fucking similar players. They're very comparable. Agreed. But just because Chovy has to do everything alone, there's some times where Showmaker doesn't have to shine, right? Like, there's times where he'll be just controlling lane, and there's definitely lane phases that he played better than Chovy in finals that people just kind of like, I don't know, they just didn't really discuss. I mean, there was that Akali game that was absolutely disgusting from Showmaker. So I just feel like he just doesn't have to put in the same work that Chovy does to win, so people kind of underrate him in that way.
I think to add to the DRX point, I think early game wise, when they had proper drafts like the first one against Unicorns of Love, the approach to dealing with Evelyn was very beautiful. The early game against Top Esports 2 and the final game that they played as the tiebreaker for who gets the first seed, I think the early game was also very, very beautiful in context of the current meta and Chovy playing Galio together with Pioshik. I think Pioshik has played well at this tournament. And I think that can be an avenue where maybe they can explore further, because if they take that lead and those drafts that sometimes geniusly align towards the enemy composition, because sometimes I feel like DRX just drift off. They blind pick Irelia into Renekton, Nidalee, Pantheon for some reason, and Showmaker's like, I'm just going to pick Akali and just have a free win. Like that happens too, so that worries me when it comes to DRX. But I agree completely that Daman stylistically are so good into them, because Daman is so patient. I feel like they are the most patient and most precise team. If they are in whatever game state they're in, I think they are very, very, very good at recognizing when they win and how to do it. And they're waiting for those times. I think the best and most obvious example was when Ghost actually played Draven, the enemy had a Shen top, and Draven, most players are like, yeah, I need to play aggro, help me, I need to play aggro. But he was just chilling. He was waiting because he recognized enemy has Shen, they need to pressure the Shen, dive Shen. He was even on CS against Kalista, and a lot of players would be like, just start running it down in that moment. They have that ticks with Draven to just go for it, just as a very, very obvious example. But I think even in that series and throughout at the playing stage, I think Daman always know how to win specific game states. And I think that's perfect against DRX because they don't know how. They can get leads and then they just start, they're like, holy shit, let's just call an Ornn ult, Bard ult, and then just run into the enemy, miss everything, and then just die. Because that's what happened against Top Esports. That was a winning position that they just threw away. And this happens very often when it comes to DRX. And you can't do that against that one.
Yep, I agree. Well, Thorin, we kept you 10 minutes over your heart out, but we got to actually go through all the quarterfinal matchups. We got to go through TSM 06, the dog shit format, and everything that you could
extra time to talk shit on TSM. I just like to give to the community. Kind of like TSM giving away all those free wins at Worlds. Boom, and we're out. So
yeah, sounds good. All right, well, that's going to be the end of the Crackdown episode 36 with Yamato. Again, we'll be running another episode after quarterfinals, but yeah, we made sure to get an episode in before quarters to just discuss everything that went on in the group stage. So thank you, Yamato, for being here, and thank you for everyone in the chat.
Cheers. My pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you very much.
Watching, and are you going to be on the desk
Yes, I'm going to be on the desk tomorrow and also for the G2 Gen.G series. So it's for 2 days and hopefully the semis too. Tweet at LOL Esports. Get me in there, guys. Spam them.
All right, sounds good. Well, I'll see you guys on the next episode of Crackdown. Thanks everyone for watching.
All the best. Cheers, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye.